Footy and Frothies. We're in virtual land today. Barney and Daggy joined once again by Oli, who's back from wherever he was last week. Seeing a movie, weren't you, Oliver?
Yes, I was. The new Ant-Man movie. I was in the quantum realm. That's why I got stuck there, but I'm out now, so
Oh, thank
I'm
God.
back.
Quick review.
I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't like amazing. It's not like a five-star groundbreaking film or anything, but it's more of a setup film. You know what I mean? Because you know how obviously the Marvel movies, they're all connected. They're all setting up to something else. It was a good setup to something to come later down the line. So if you're keeping in track with the Marvel story at the moment, as I am, definitely go along and see it.
Beautiful. And how's Barney?
Been good, mate. Just been obviously spent a bit of time with you watching some footy over the weekend, which is enjoyable. So, life soldiers on.
Oli was there too.
Self,
Was it as enjoyable with him as well?
yeah, one day he only turns up one, fell back up for all.
Anyway, what do you make of it all? Actually, Oli,
It's a
give
really
us.
good.
Yeah, go on. Sorry,
Good cover.
we got to get used to this freaking Zoom stuff again. Go on, go, Barney. What are you gonna say?
No, no, there's some very enjoyable football. I think majority of teams perform pretty well as well. Obviously, a lot of the big names only get half an hour or so of footy, so you get to see them and then the young kids coming through. But there was one or two performances that left some fans a bit upset over it as well.
And Ollie, what do you take? Immediate reactions from last week? And you didn't get to talk really about round one, probably. It's a long way in the rear vision mirror now and doesn't really matter. And I think you're treating the whole sort of trial setup as a bit of a grain of salt exercise anyway. But any takeaways you didn't get to touch on last week?
Not really any takeaways from the first round that'll impact the season too much because as trials usually are, for most teams, that first week of the trials was sort of for the underneath guys, the guys coming through the system, all the guys on the periphery that'll probably be playing reserve grade for most of this season. So I didn't really take much away in terms of how it may impact the upcoming season, but definitely this past week, I mean, pretty much a full squad for every team, if not a couple of players missing. But yeah, I think this week was probably a bit more of an indicator.
Yeah, fair call. I think, as Barn said, there's a few that I think by now can be starting to get nervous if they weren't already. And lots of boxes ticked as we'll get to as we run through each and every game. We'll touch on some news first of all. Just quickly, some housekeeping for everyone joining us across everywhere, Spotify, but I know YouTube had quite a few new subscribers lately. If you've got a Supercoach League you're looking to fill, give us a shout out in the comments either on social media or on YouTube, and we'll either jump in and you can take us Pelicans on, or we can spread it on to the rest of the group and hopefully find you a few, fill those last couple of spots in your leagues. Let us know there. Let's get to some signing news. Very quickly, the Herald's reported this afternoon that Mitch Moses will stay at Parramatta for allegedly around 1.25 after turning 1.25 a year for essentially the rest of his career after turning down, I think it was 1.3 for the Tigers, which wasn't as big or as much of a difference as I guess purported in some parts. Initial thoughts there, Ollie?
It's a little bit of a surprise because I thought when Dylan Brown re-signed, I thought Moses would be going. That's not necessarily to say that I thought he would be going to the Tigers. The Dolphins are rumored a little bit. The Bulldogs, I didn't really know where he was going to go, but I thought, okay, he's probably going to move on from Parramatta now because if we look at Mitch Moses, every time his contracts come up, he always goes into the last year of his contract, and then there is some, I'm not going to say controversy, but there's always a story, right? Because I remember when he left the Tigers originally, there were the talks that he was going to sign with Parramatta. Then he got an offer from the Tigers, but wanted to wait and see what he was getting offered elsewhere. Then went back to accept the original offer, and it was off the table, and he ended up at Parramatta. And then, of course, what was it last year? 2 years ago, with the whole Brisbane Broncos situation where he might have been signing with the Broncos. And at one point, at least we heard that apparently he was going to the Broncos and he may have agreed to go to the Broncos in principle. And yeah, Moses is someone who weighs his options up very heavily. And it seems that, and I don't have anything against anyone who goes after money or anything at all, but it does seem like he likes to weigh up how much he's going to get out of a contract and what he can actually get out of it on the field. And I think because this offer from the Tigers, as you said, wasn't too different or so much larger than the offer that he got from Parramatta, he probably thought he's better off staying at the Eels.
Barn?
Yeah, well, I said to a few of the guys that we talked to about this stuff, the longer it went on, sort of as soon as we got to Christmas or past Christmas time, I was getting more and more certain that he was going to stay at Parramatta. The money that sort of Dylan Brown did take sort of made me rethink it a fraction. But yeah, the longer it went on and the closer it got to the start of the season, I was getting pretty confident that he was going to stay at Parramatta, especially with Dylan Brown now confirmed there for the next 4 or 5 years as well. So he knows who his playing partner is going to be for the for his next contract. And unless the money was massively different, he was going to get at Parramatta. I think he's pretty happy. It's a negotiating tactic, the way he does his deals, and he drags them out as long as he can to see get every last scrap off the table. But
yeah, I agree. I think that's what it has been. It's I dare say Isaac. Is it Isaac? Still his manager? Is he banned? Whoever it is these days is
one of his mates might be.
Would have gone back and forth a few times just to get that extra 150 from Para, but good luck to him. It's good for. I think it's not a bad thing for both parties. I think it's good for Parramatta. It's good for Mitch Moses, and nothing ventured, nothing gained for the Tigers. They still got 1.5 to spend. They're going to. Whether they do now look at George Williams, whether they do now keep an eye on a certain halfback, maybe living around Tempe at the moment, that might not be too happy with the way things are going at Cogra, whether there's other options on the table, whether they look elsewhere and look for a fullback. I don't know. So that's all to play out. Obviously some good stuff, not going to get down about it. So, like I said, I don't think there's any real losers. We all move on, and good luck to them. Other signing news from the weekend, Dom Young, again, reportedly, haven't seen an official announcement, but reportedly set to join the Roosters from next year, turning down $500 a year at the Knights. So the sombrero lives on. Yeah, good player. You'll be fine at the Roosters.
Yeah, definitely on an upward trajectory as well. Looks like he's definitely gained momentum in the last 12 months. The first year was a bit rocks and diamonds, but definitely getting a lot sharper in his skill set. And he could pick up for the Roosters.
Ollie, anything to add? Cool.
I think it's a solid signing for the Roosters. I've just been trying to think of where. Sorry, I think that it might have cut out a little bit there, but I just, in terms of where he fits into that side, I guess, does that mean maybe next year, which is when he's believed to be joining the Roosters, is that when maybe a Teddy gets moved into the halves and possibly a Sawali or Joseph Manu moves to fullback, and there's a bit of shifting around the edges there, so Dom Young can play on the wing? Because right now, the way the Sydney Roosters side setting up for 2023, I mean, they've got wingers set in stone there. So I think that signing might be a bit indicative of the sort of midterm plans for the Roosters next year.
I would suggest so, or one of them's on the way out. Potentially Kiri.
Paulo and Aaron are probably. I think Paulo and Allen are probably just a stop. They're filling role at the moment. Probably see one or not both of them move on next year when Young comes in.
Yeah. And just another couple of quick news. I've just seen that Corey Pakes has re-signed with Brisbane for another 2 years, and Adam Dewey extended for another year with the Tigers to just at least take his name off the table there. Good. Judiciary news is everyone got off, everyone got fined. Rapana, probably indicative of how well they are serious about dropping, last year's rap sheets, because Rapana got off for a couple of high shots. Sutton, King, Croston all copped a fine from the weekend. Obviously not much doing early at the Judiciary, boys. Ollie?
No, not really.
We saw it last year. They seemed pretty content with letting people off with the fine if there's any way they can do it.
Yeah. Injury news, unfortunately, Taylor May's out for the year with an ACL. No good for Penrith. Obviously, we'll get to see probably Taruva, possibly even McLean in that spot as we get through the year. So not panic stations, but obviously unfortunate as well. TPJ looks like he may be out for a few weeks now with his calf, from what I was reading today. So slow start for him at the Dogs. Kenny Mamalo did another knee on the weekend. I think that's about 4 from the last 4 games he's played. Edric Lee out for the first 3 or 4 weeks, which opens up, I suppose, Jack Bostock for those Supercoach cheapie hunters. And speaking of which, Josh Schuster's going to be out round 1, calf injury. So Supercoach cheapie hunters might be hunting at least for another week there. Any thoughts on any of them, Barn?
Well, Cooper, to me, looked like he was probably starting to put a bit of pressure on already, and the season hadn't even started, to be honest. So I think Schuster's probably only 2 or 3 bad games away from Cooper Johns pushing him back into the back row anyway. But, it's definitely a blow, especially for the Bulldogs. They look quite good in patches, or definitely to start the game last weekend and the week before. And that injection of size and strength off the rig coming into this week would have been a big one for them. It's probably going to hurt them a little bit just to start off the season.
Nothing to add there, Al?
Not really. I think I have to agree with Barney as well, and we'll obviously get to it when we cover the Manly Roosters game. But I thought Cooper Johns was really good in that game. So if he can repeat that in round 1, I don't think it's panic stations for Manly. And the Penrith situation, I think it seems pretty resolved already. I think Taruva just comes in for Taylor May.
Yeah. So, I guess that's a wrap of the news.
Just a little hiccup for Taylor May, who's actually looking like a really exciting prospect, second year coming in. So that's his sort of development back 12 months, unfortunately. But
yeah, still only young. He'll have plenty of footy ahead of him. Hopefully the rehab goes well for him. All right, well, the pre-season challenge is in the books. Let's get into looking back at what we learnt from each game as I tick that over. That's better. I can hear myself. It kicked off Friday night at 6 p.m. with 36-14. Newcastle looking less than inspiring for the most part, let's say. Did you do stats on any of this, Barn, or are we just rattling off like last week?
We'll go back into the stats next week, and I might even try and shorten them up a bit this year.
Beauty.
So,
just
quick spiel on each game.
Cool.
No, you're right.
Well, as I said, it was a pretty good showing from Parramatta, I thought, getting a few guns back this week, Barn. We'll start with Newcastle, though. We've been concerned since our long preview. We've been concerned a little bit last week. Are we even more concerned now?
Well, I thought their forwards probably won the first 15 or 20 minutes. I thought Newcastle were probably on top there. Couple of nice touches early from from Miller and Ponga, but I thought their forwards were winning that battle for 15 minutes or so. But as soon as the rotation came on, Parramatta's the depth just fell away from that Newcastle pack, and if Newcastle's really need to find some kind of creativity for just to support that back line. There's a couple of guys out there that can score points, but they're just getting no decent ball or being put in any decent positions at the moment, which is absolutely killing.
Yeah, well, Marza was probably a standout when speaking of that, and I don't know how much clean service he gets over the course of a year, but did a lot of bullocking work, and I thought it was just about their best on field, you'd say, Ollie?
Yes, I would say Greg Marzhew was quite good for his new club, the Newcastle Knights. That he was contracted at the Titans, by the way. Everyone knows this, but they released him. The Titans will probably release Pereira before the season starts to him as well. But he was obviously amazing. Just the size as well. I have no doubts that he won't be a winger for his entire career. He's just got that size where he could maybe move into the back row. Maybe not, obviously not yet, but in a couple of years or so. But it was great watching him, especially when you're right. There was so little coming from other areas for Newcastle, especially towards the end of that first half and throughout the second half.
Any other takeaways, Barn? We saw 40 minutes of Ponga in the front line. Some nice touches, but already defence is a concern.
He's going to have to get a couple of bodyguards on either side of him because there was a hell of a lot of first-up missed tackles, one-on-one tackles from Ponga. Miller seemed to add a little bit. He really looked to me like the only one who was creating any sort of creativity and opportunities for his outside backs. But it's just that fraction small. He got driven back quite a few times, I noticed, where they picked him up and dragged him 5-10 metres backwards, which obviously doesn't help. Sort of slows everything down a little bit there. Hastings just sort of blended into the background again. I'm not sure if he's been told to sort of try and hands off a little bit to start the season or what that's about, but I expected a bit more of an impact out of him, to be honest, to start the season.
He's a funny one because the more he went on at the Tigers, it's almost like he started touching balls for the sake of touching balls rather than having meaningful touches, and it already felt that way, I reckon, 20 minutes into this game. And then for Ponga to go off at half-time, I thought, well, my takeaway was they probably hooked him then because they didn't need a week explaining how he can't defend in the front line. Because I would have thought a new spine you'd try and get at least at 50 minutes an hour out of it, especially when you hadn't really seen different. If you'd seen 4 magic combinations come off, it'd go, oh, there it is, we don't need to worry.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I suspect it's more of the defensive issues than anything, and just not wanting to deal with that commentary for a week. And yeah, I just don't quite know. So there's some good kicky. Some of his final tackle options were fine. Hastings, there's a lot of he's a good footballer. I just don't quite know. Yeah, I hope his role's not subject to just shoveling balls onto backline players or having that first touch for the sake of touching it. Jack John's good again. And
he's quite good. Looks like he's going to force his way into the 17.
Well, they could probably really use him, to be honest. And yeah, Ollie, anything else you want to take away from the Knights team?
From the Knights, not really. As you said, Ponga, he didn't really do too much to get Newcastle supporters excited about his prospects playing at 6. But again, it was only half a game. But other than Marju, I honestly think there's no real complete standouts for the Knights in this game.
Barn?
Yeah, Frizzell did his job like he always does. Trevor Best had 1 or 2 nice touches, a couple of nice runs. But I think, Jack Johns was probably their best forward. Daniel Saifidi, if he played longer minutes, probably would have been the standout, but just didn't play massive minutes in this game. And the creativity for me is the biggest thing coming out of this one night. There only seems to be limited points of attack, and they're not really firing at all at the moment. I know it's a trial. It's only pre-season, as everyone says, and it's a trial match, but you would have liked to have seen them probably cut open the defence a couple more times than what they did.
My other big concern for Newcastle is their defence. That was average, very average at times, and not just talking about one-on-one, but it's one thing the week before when we sort of said the Tigers had no defensive structure with the kids and were just getting stripped on the side and that sort of thing. This looked like their structure was in place, and it just looked like people weren't aiming up. It was like people going around them, people going through them. It looked, at the back end, it looked like they could score with will, just that sort of 2 off the ruck sort of back row line. They were scoring, whoever was running through that hole was scoring at points there. That was real concerning to me.
I think it's going to be a pretty common thread throughout the season, to be honest. Something changes.
Yeah, what's going to change? Anything to add on Newcastle before we get to Para?
No.
It was a Mitch Moses show for Parramatta for the most part. He looked fantastic. He looked fit. He looked fresh. He looked fast. And now he's re-signed. A bit of a shame for the Tigers fans, but he was. There was very good signs. Combination with Brown was there. Combination with Gutherson was there. Still some work to be done with the hooker, but I'm sure that'll come into line. And I thought, given they were missing and will be missing Sean Lane as well, the back row was pretty good. Hopgood looks a great asset. I think he's going to become a very, very good first-grade player. Ollie?
I think at this point he's probably the one. Now, obviously, with Madison, Parramatta use him in a variety of ways, sometimes off the bench at lock, but you'd have to think he's the one who's going to be replacing Madison for the first few weeks. So, and I think he's earned it as well. Of course, there was all the hype during the off season, particularly around him coming from Parramatta. But he showed it. He proved himself. I'd say probably the best forward out there. If not, it'd be Regan Campbell-Gillard, who also had a really good game. But I'd have to say it was Hopgood who stood out. And we didn't talk about him a whole lot last year. At times he was a bit off, but I thought at least in this game, Clint Gutherson a pretty big performance as well, and we've spoken about it, how at Parramatta, it seemed to be for a while where every week one of their players in the spine would have a huge performance, but the others were sort of at least sort of in the background a bit. But I thought both Moses was the standout, but Moses and Gutherson both had a really good game in that one. And off the back of that, Dylan Brown just did what he needed to.
Yeah, no, 100% correct. I can't really say anything else apart from what you guys have said, to be honest. I thought Jack Murchie was probably pretty good. I dare say he'll find himself a spot in the 17 for the majority of the season, even when Madison does come back. And he's one that can sort of fill that lock back row position for play pretty much anywhere in the forwards, really. You could probably push him up into the front row at a pinch if you needed to. I dare say he'll find himself a spot in the 17. Sean Russell was good, considering he had pretty much all last year off with the nasty injury at the start of the season. And looks like he's probably firming for a spot on the wing outside Sivo there, on the other side to Sivo. And yeah, I think your point on Gutho was good. I thought he got involved at the right times and sort of laid off when he needed to. Didn't parts of the game where he didn't need to be involved. He was very selective in when he got involved. It was quite and it helped him out a lot. The only real thing that sort of gave me a bit of a worry was Hodgson early in this game, or probably for the first half, looked quite slow out of dummy half. His service off the ground was really poor. It did pick up towards the back end of the game. Obviously, there's some ring rust there, but I think that they've gone backwards a step with Barney leaving and Hodgson coming in to hooker.
Yeah. Does Cini start in the centres there? I don't know where Blake's at. But...
Yeah, well, Blake's got an injury, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he had a broken
arm or something.
So I don't know how far away he is. I assume he's a few weeks.
I imagine he'll start for you.
He's bulked up. Looks like he's bulked up, and he's been good both games.
Some size on. Yeah, he's not getting driven back the way he was. I guess for those couple of games.
And I think probably Murchie and Dury did enough to. They can get away with that back line to start the season until they get their reinforcements back.
Did Dury pick up an injury?
Yeah, I think he's okay. I think it was
ankle sprain or something.
Either a hamstring or a calf or an ankle, something like that. I suppose they do have Nathan Brown up their sleeve. They just don't seem to like him.
I'm pretty sure they don't want him there, from what I can see.
He's well and truly tucked up a sleeve, but see how far down the barrel they get before they play him, whatever he's done wrong there. Good signs for Para. I guess you've got to say, I think your point on Gutho is good, that he's pretty much the barometer of Parramatta, in that when his timing's right and he's picking, how am I going to say this, when he's injecting himself just enough, they're playing well. I think when he's overplaying his hand or underplaying it, they're not. So I think the Spiner will come out happy. Para fans can be happy enough. They'll be competitive again, and you give them a tick, and I guess we move on from this game, do we?
Yeah, and the forwards didn't really dominate like they have at times last year, and Dylan Brown wasn't involved that much either, so this scoreline could have been anything if Para were in top gear. But...
And I think Paulo was much happier just pretending to be a 5'8" for a lot of the game rather than actually tucking under his shoulder. But he looked crisp. He looked good enough.
He'll be fine.
Did his job. He'll be right. We get on to the next game. This was one not many saw coming, including the Roosters, apparently, who sort of thought they were coming this game ready to go. 28-16, and it was, 28-0 early on? If not, it was 28-0 before some late tries to Newcastle, and the Seagulls looked a different team, Barney.
Newcastle played twice. Roosters jagged a couple there at the back end of the game, but really positive signs for Manly. I thought their forwards looked a lot fitter than they were last year. They were quite quick, mobile, and they were dominant early. Like the Roosters forward pack's known to getting off to a quick start and jumping teams and rolling through the middle, but they were on the back foot for a large part of this game. And Manly were coming through very strongly. The two back rowers were fantastic. Olakau'atu and Tuolangi, they were fantastic. They were breaking holes at will at times against a Roosters defence that you're not really used to seeing that. Obviously, there's a bit of change. Swally topped the head knock and was off early, and then you've got another position to change out there. So, and they went straight for it. And they were really the better for it. They just look so quick all across the field. They look really mobile. They look really fit. And when you get the likes of Pulo into holes, and KO Weeks is, I don't think he's much slower than Cooler, to be honest. He looks quite quick as well at fullback. That try that they chimed together for down the right-hand side was fantastic. And they look like they're going to cause a lot of problems for some outside defenders, especially can you imagine some of the weaker teams trying to defend those guys if they're getting that kind of service that they were getting in this trial game?
Absolutely. And we saw a lot that on display, not only last year, but even in these trials, early ball movement to those centres. There was points, I think, in a lot of games. So if they're happy to do that, it's fast outside backs are dangerous. You can't, obviously, to use a cliche, you can't coach speed, and if they're willing to get the ball out there early and stand up these blokes one-on-one, Manly become quite a scary prospect for some teams, especially with the two big shadows looming to come back next week.
Some big, couple of big boys out there in the centres and on the wing as well, but they're not small fellas. With pace and strength.
And strike now, having another partner in crime, Moloko Atu, now gives them two strike second rowers. And I was pretty impressed with him.
I was impressed with him as well.
Wouldn't be surprised if we don't see
him. He looks like he'll fit into that probably 14 role and give Croker a rest at different times. And he's probably much the similar sort of player to Brandon Smith, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I think if they told him, we want you to go and play front row for 20 minutes, so I reckon he'd just put his head down and have a crack. So, not overly tall, but definitely solid, good leg speed, and good service out of dummy half. I thought he was impressive.
And a couple of nice kicks too. I think one of these bombs they do points. Ollie, any takeaway for Manly?
Well, for Manly, and I don't know if this was indicative of Cherry Evans not being there, and I guess less of that structure and him sort of controlling the play. And this isn't something that I don't think it'll be beneficial for him too often throughout the year. But it just seemed like almost every play they were just trying to keep the ball alive for as long as possible. It was almost like the floor was lava, and I think a lot of their tries, especially their first few, came from offloads and from keeping the ball alive in situations where otherwise, and in the past, like most teams would just take the tackle. And the support play was tremendous, I thought, from Garrick as well. I thought it was amazing. And Cooper Johns, we mentioned him at the top of the show, but I know it's not, I don't want to say a first grade game because it's a trial, but it's one of the better games I think we've ever seen Cooper Johns play. And he's definitely going to be the second string for if a Cherry Evans or Schuster goes down, or if Schuster moves back into the second row, which I don't know how I'd feel about that, because to both your points, Kelma Tuolagi and Ola Kawatu together looked amazing. And if Manly needs anything...
You've got a lock there too, you can...
I've said it for about 3 years. Jake belongs in the front row. Schuster at 13.
That's an option.
Both sides of the field.
That's an option too, but I think this partnership in the second row, if they can keep it up throughout the year, is going to be huge for Manly, because for how long have we been talking about, even during Tom Travojevich's amazing 2021, one of the areas of concern for Manly was their forward pack. So if they can get these guys going consistently, and defensively they're fine, but in attack as well, they can be lethal weapons, I think, for Manly.
Exciting times for them. Less exciting times for the Roosters. As I said, even Tedesco went on record after the game as saying they turned up thinking they were ready to go and were ambushed here. Any positive signs, Barn?
Real slow start. The most positive sign was probably the majority of their forwards. Their main forwards did their job while they were out there. They may have only played 30 minutes, but the Butchers were quite good. Lindsay Collins and Lodge did a decent job in the time that they were out there. But, they didn't sort of aim up to try and to push in front of the Manly team. And the biggest takeaway from them was, again, Brandon Smith was probably their best player on the field in a team that was well and truly kept under control for the majority of it. He did provide points where he was causing problems in and around the ruck for the Manly defence, and his defence is always pretty solid. So I thought Brandon Smith, or the Cheese, was probably the Roosters' best player by a fair margin.
I agree. He does look a lot fitter. He looks sharp. He looks switched on. I still think Radley was good again. Good enough in the times he had. and will be, still with what I said last week. I think that they're going to form into quite a good combination. It really showed that when they did have ball without one of their halves on the field, there was no direction there at times, even when they had possession. It was quite concerning. And no Manu, I suppose, is their next best ball player, but quite concerning their lack of really anything to offer, Ollie.
Yeah, it sort of more came towards the end of the game, as you said. I'm sure you would have enjoyed seeing that decoy run as well from Radley. It was Lindsay Collins who ended up scoring what it looked like Cheese was just going to go to him to Radley because he had a couple of times he just ran straight through and it ended up being the perfect play. So I think we're going to see that a fair bit more during the season as well. For the Roosters, one other person, and I know you mentioned him alongside his brother, but I thought at least in defence for a poor defensive Rooster side for most of that game, Egan Butcher was doing his best to hold it all together, and he put in a great individual effort, but unfortunately he didn't have any blokes sort of backing up with him and putting in that same sort of effort in defence. But I thought he was great, and he was solid in attack too.
Now, anything else you want to touch on from the Roosters, boys?
Terrell May was quite good. He looks like he'll be probably the first choice bench interchange alongside Egan. So I think there's enough there. But, yeah, to me, when you start looking at a lot of these players that did get 20 minutes or so, they look quite thin. If they have a run of injuries in that forward pack, they could drop away quite quickly.
Yeah. We'll just touch on, we didn't do in the first game, but we might just touch on as well. We all have our Supercoach. Any Supercoach thoughts now are on the verge of having to put our teams up in lights. Any players from this game and the first game you're gravitating towards now, or you're happy to put the big pen through?
I'll be having a look at Cooper at his price. If he's going to be playing the first couple of weeks there, depending on what the injury status is with Schuster. Tuolangi and Olakau'atu were definitely blokes that you'd be looking at to put in a back row position. From the Manly side, probably Sipley maybe for a bench spot in your front row rotation. I thought he was quite good in this game. We didn't get to see Manu. Teddy's a bit of a question mark now, I think. If they're going to start slowly like they generally do for the first 3 or 4 weeks, it might be worth keeping your powder dry for a month, trying to pick him up at a discount rate down the track. You're probably going to want him at some point during the season, but there's a few questions there now, I think.
Ollie, anything for you?
Cool has probably rubber stamped himself as a centre as well.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think I forgot most of the players who I've got in my squad. I haven't checked it for cool. Set and forget, but I am pretty sure I've got Kelmer in there already. So exciting prospect there, Kelmer.
And I'd say if you're looking at if you did have sights on Mitch Moses, he'll be fine. And if you did have sights on Jermaine Hopgood, which apparently everyone does, he'll be fine.
I think he's a big one, to be honest. Yeah, I think he's going to be averaging close to 60. Looks like a worker. He just gets through plenty of work. So
I like what you had to say actually, and it just sparked me. And I'll get to my other big one later that I'm a bit keen on now. If you're looking for a front rower, I think Lindsay Collins might have a few tries up his sleeve this year. So around 450 and, looking for a pod, as they say, he might be one that will benefit from that Cheese-Radley combination and those crash play tactics. You can find a try and you'll put out as much work as anyone else in that team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get to the Charity Shield, which kicked off Saturday afternoon in a very hot and mudgy, where we saw the Dragons perhaps continue to idle along down the path we've suggested they may already be on. My notes here just read Dragons are shit. Little looked okay for the Dragons. What did you make of this, Ollie?
Well, the Dragons honestly stunk, and if you like a great attacking football team and an exciting team, this might have been the game to watch because South Sydney are exactly that, and they were given every opportunity, especially in that first half, to just open her up and go for it. And all the stars were on show. I thought South Sydney's spine was tremendous. Their starting four pack was amazing. It's weird. It was pretty much an across the board. And I went and looked at the stats today. You can't really say there was anyone sort of just plodding along or anything because the Dragons literally were that bad that every Souths player was just given the opportunity to be that good. And it just looks like, and you mentioned it the other day when we were at the Grey Gums watching the Tigers Raiders game, and we were sort of talking about teams that you could rely on in 2023, and you brought up Souths. Well, this was a South Sydney Rabbitohs performance, and what we can sort of say about South Sydney here is what we were saying every week probably last year, and especially in the forwards with the likes of your Totolas. Burgess was great as well, Kaloa Matangi, and then you had Jai Arrow and Cameron Murray putting up big meters. I think nearly every player in the starting lineup for South ran for over 100 meters. Like it was just a clinical South Sydney performance. It's what you'd expect them to put up against a bottom four team. And I know currently the Dragons aren't a bottom four team from last year, but well, the writing kind of seems like it's on the wall, isn't it? But the Dragons just were horrible. A couple of things I'd say. Hunt tried his best. He couldn't quite salvage this one, unfortunately, for the Dragons like he did in a few games last year. And I kept a close eye as well on Blake Laurie, who I don't think was horrible just because he individually had a good season last year. And I've got in my notes here, obviously at times over the past couple of years, I've made jokes about how certain players are too good for their current teams and should be trying to find a way out. Well, Blake Laurie might end up in that situation. I've called it the Get Me Away from These Geeks Club. I had Luke Thompson there in 2021. He was the first member, and Blake Laurie could be heading there because consistently in that very poor forward pack, he's usually the one who at least puts in the effort. So I'll give him a shout as well.
Daniel Alvaro still in that squad?
I'm sure he's loving life in France right now, playing, I think it's for Featherstone. I'm not sure if he's still there because they got relegated, but I hope Daniel Alvaro as well.
Barn,
the Dragons.
What do you say about the Dragons? This looked like it was going to be 50-60-0. And if they didn't take off half their side after 30 to 40 minutes in this game, it probably would have been. They didn't look like they had any spark whatsoever. They didn't look like they were going to break the line until back end of the game when the reserve forwards for the South got a bit tired and they started sort of throwing the ball around a little bit. They weren't competitive in the slightest. I thought Max Fairguy and Lomax tried quite hard, but they were given no real opportunities out there. Musgrove and Laurie were probably, okay without being good. I thought Ben Murdoch, Masilla, and Sewer were probably. Ben Murdoch, Masilla, Sewer, and Burns were probably the only three that looked like they were competitive with any of their opposition at any time during this game. But again, they still weren't as good as the guys that were playing on the other side of the field. So what can you say? Hunt had a couple of nice touches. Sullivan maybe had one or two decent touches, but Sully and Ravalawa, I don't know what happened to those two blokes, but they played close to the worst football I've seen out of those two a couple of years.
I hear he was
they're not bad players.
I hear he was quite intoxicated, as I am, quite drunk by the end of the night, so maybe he started around half time.
We started early, possibly. But the Rever and Sully had shocking games. They're much better than what they are, but they may look like reserve graders at best.
They just don't come across as a happy team. Like it sounds, don't sound like a wanker, absolutely. But you watch them play and they don't really feel like. And like I've followed an unhappy team for years, and they look a little bit happier at the moment. But you can tell it just comes across in energy. Poor old Tyrell Sloan thrown back into the Wolves there after not wanted last year. And obviously that shone through at the end, but.
That trip over and drop ball straight into Latrell, and Latrell went and ran for 50-odd metres. I just sat there kind of sad thinking, I feel really bad for you. Yeah, he did have quite a narrow game. I think
he dropped a bomb that led to a try, and he dropped a kick-off, and he was in some shock.
He had 5 or 6 areas.
And he was in some bad defensive positions off scrums. I think one of the other tries, he was on the wrong side of the field. Or broke late, and there's all sorts of... didn't have a good day out. So, hopefully he does bounce back, but I just don't see the upside here, as we've said. So I don't know what more boots can we
A lot of it comes from last year, mate. We all said at the start of last year that he needed to play the kids and he needed to get them together and bring these kids through, and he didn't do it. He burned a few of them on the way through last year, And like, these young kids that have got the skill and the talent to be able to come through, they're looking below par at the moment. I think that's got a lot to do with the bloke in the head seats.
Yeah.
Well, the two that are probably going to be starting at the start of the year, and the two main ones in this game are Jaden Sullivan and Tyrell Sloan. Reports came out during the off-season that Tyrell Sloan had requested his release, and there were rumours at some point that Sullivan was going to request his release. So even the guys that are getting the game time now, I think Hawks pretty much burned the bridge with them in some way, and the performance hasn't been great. But yeah, again, a ball hasn't been kicked in an NRL game yet this season, and the Dragons won't be playing until round 2. So they're guaranteed 2 points in round 1. So that's a positive at least, but it'd be interesting to see how.
Only young one, he really did give an opportunity to last year, and that was Figai, and he's going quite well.
And the 5'8" that's no longer with us.
Don't know when he'll be there.
No. But I thought Little was okay. Looked a bit.
Little had one of his better games for years, and so did the other one that he's like Simpkins as well. So.
Yeah, well,
last year
isn't it funny? Both those players had raps as junior hookers, and finally are showing some of it under some different coaching. So we'll see what that brings for them. Now the Bunnies, as you said earlier, as you alluded to, sort of stole my line, but in a comp where we know Penrith are half a step slower, we don't know where Melbourne are quite at. We obviously don't know where the Chooks are at after that. We don't know where Para are without some of their edges. We know what we get with Souths. We're getting the same team that made the prelim final. They've all been together a bit longer, and they made that final. Remember, they started pretty slow last year. It took a long time for them to get up and going. Walker looked, at average for a long time last year. They look crisp and fit and ready to go, and they didn't have Latrell for long at the start of last year either. So they've got him fit. They've got Walker obviously enjoyed himself on the weekend, and Elias is better for the run last year and looked pretty good here. And they're the ones going to be up and going, and I think they're a real hot top 3 chance because they're going to win early games and they're going to win them well, and that sets you up for the year, if nothing else, before the other teams are up and going. I love that, and always have loved that. The 1-2 punch of Cook and Murray, it was on display here. But my other little super coach diamond I've found, which I've talked myself into being quite keen on now, is Tom Burgess, because when that 1-2 punch is going, if not one of them's in the scoring, he's always the one that's backing up like he did on the weekend and finding a try. He's going to be good for 150 metres, and he's going to be playing big minutes here because they've lost a couple of his mates. So I can see him averaging, mid to high 50s and doing a pretty good job this year. So he's the one I'm latching one of my FRF carts onto. So what else did you take away from South's, Barn?
They were flattered, obviously, by the defence from the Dragons, but they played some fantastic footy. And the big thing for me was Walkers and Latrell weren't the ones setting this game on fire. It was through that middle third of the field, as you mentioned, with Burgess, Arrow, Cam, Murray. Cook, to me, looked fantastic in this game. He looked better than he has for quite some time, to be honest. He was out probing in and around the ruck and attracting defenders, and then the play moved on from there. I think the best player of the weekend I saw in this game, I'm pretty sure, was the inside, outside under the posts with Elias, Murray, Cook, and I think it was Arrow that ended up scoring underneath the post. But that was fantastic interchange of play back through that middle third again of the field, from about 15, 20 metres out. So there's some real danger signs, as you said, if you inject firing Latrell or Walker and this backline into a team that's already sort of putting up numbers like they did against, obviously close to the worst team in the competition. But
we do have to temper all this by saying that they are playing reserve grade.
Game also, yeah. But and another one there. There was big talk on the Supercoach front for Davey Moeli earlier. Some goose that runs the whole thing and turned around and said he didn't make the 17, so he's probably not going to be in the team come round 1. I'll eat the hat if he's not in the team come round 1. I know he was named at 19 or 20 or whatever it was in this trial match, but he came on and had a fantastic game, and I'll be very surprised if he doesn't make his way into the 17. So he's probably one at a very low price that you could chuck into your forward rotation there for your super coach team. Someone like AJ is never going to let you down. You know there's going to be games during the year where he's going to ton up probably 2 or 3 times a month where they just go to that left edge and he scores a whole heap of tries down there. If you're not seriously thinking about Latrell as one of your fullback positions, then I don't know what you're thinking about, to be honest, because you'd have to be probably the second or third person that you think about if you're looking at the fullback spot. So there'll be a time when Cody Walker catches fire, but he's one that you really got to get. He's sort of, he'll have 3 good games, 2 bad ones, and then he'll go on a run for 6 weeks. And yeah, he's a bit patchy during the year with Cody Walker, but yeah, I think he's one that you'll need to find. And the 2 centres from South definitely, when they get out to 80-minute games and they're starting to get a bit more ball out there to the backs rather than playing it through the middle of the field, then you're going to see Isaiah Tass and Campbell Graham come to the fore as well. So.
Yeah, it's covered off well. The only thing stopping me from really chiming into Souths is I'm aware of having too many players from any one team this year.
They do have a tough draw.
Yeah,
5
but
6 weeks.
they've got
top teams.
They've got pretty much all of last year's top 8. But as I've sort of thought about, the real top players don't get too affected by the tough draws.
No,
Murray will still do his job.
Oh, well, Murray will be. He's in my team at the moment, and he'll probably be my captain for large parts of the year as well. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be one of the first blokes I buy, and I won't be selling him unless I have to.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Anything else from this game?
No, not really.
I think your first line of the description was pretty good.
Cool. You right to keep going, or one of you need to freshen your drinks?
No. Good.
Crack on. The World Club Challenge came up next, just before 7 o'clock in some interesting Western Sydney weather. We had all 4 seasons and a rainbow through the space of this game. As 13-12, St Helens defeated Penrith. I think at one point they were 7 or 8 to 1 outsiders coming into this game, and I thought they were clearly the better team for a good hour in this game. Barn, Oli, you went out there, got rained out, came home. So how was the atmosphere out there, and what were your initial takeaways?
Well, first of all, I think it's pretty fitting that the game was delayed originally because they were worried about St Helens dealing with the hot Australian weather. Whereas when the game started, the weather could not be more British. Like it was literally, unfortunately, over there in the old UK, they get a fair bit of rain over there, so we got a bit here while they were playing as well. The atmosphere was great, especially and this is probably the bit I was most looking forward to actually going to the game. The group of supporters that actually came over from England, I'd say St Helens brought them over. It would have been the supporter group. They wouldn't shut up, and it was great.
Through the TV.
Honestly, they wouldn't. Yeah, they would not shut up, and you could just see them. Like half the time, whenever something was going on, one of my eyes was over on the hill, and you could just see them just emoting. And as we were actually going into the ground, which by the way, I'm not going to go on a rant this time, but getting into the stadium was a bit of a headache as well. So yes, they do need the new ground.
Can't imagine.
But to actually get to where we were, we had to walk through it. And as we're walking through, someone started when the Saints come marching in chant. And it was crazy because about half of them were lined up for the bar. So we were like behind the bar trying to walk through, and the rest of them were right there. And it was just like deafening. It was great to hear. The players obviously would have got a bit of a kick out of that and reacted to that when they first came out on the field. You could see they acknowledged the fans that were there, but the atmosphere was great. I didn't mind the rain, but the old man Paddy got to about half time, and he'd asked me a few times during the game. He's like, "Oh, if you want to go, like we can go." And then it got to half time, and he turned around and sort of said, "Yeah, let's go." So I think he was really looking to go home and getting a bit wet, but no, went home at half time, had a shower, and watched the rest of it on TV.
Barn, let's talk about St Helens first. They were fantastic. Some stars in this team, stars of, I guess, world football. Wellesby put himself up in lights again, and big Alex Walmsley. Well, what a performance! He was outstanding all night.
Yeah, I said in the preview to this game that I was looking forward to seeing him take on Leota and Fish, and he might have a tough night ahead of him. he took it in his stride and just kept rolling. Man, that Blake play for Footy through the middle of the field. He's a massive unit and he's very, very hard to stop. And for such a big bloke, he's not sloppy in defence either. Generally, you find the bigger blokes are a little bit sloppy in their defence, but he was hitting like a truck at different times in this game, and you could see how much it meant to him at the end of the game with the emotion that he was letting out there. But he was fantastic, I thought, and easily the best forward on the field. Destructive, ball in hand, and in defence as well. You mentioned Wellesby. He's becoming one of my favourite players coming out of the World Cup, and what I've seen out of him, he's one of the strangest running styles I've seen. But he's very effective. Some good acceleration, and to me, he seems much more suited as a six than a fullback as well. So I can see somebody who's looking for a six going out and trying to get him to come across here to the NRL, even a fullback.
I know a club with about $1 million to spend.
Well, you can fill in at 6 and at 1 for you. So push Billy into 7 or whatever.
It was yesterday when Bulldog Richie put out his article about how apparently a few NRL clubs are interested, but he's contracted to St Helens till 2025. So reportedly what a few NRL clubs are trying to do is sign him for 2026 and then try to work out a deal with St Helens where they can pay a transfer fee and maybe probably next year look to getting him over. But if you were to play him as a fullback, though, we just mentioned in the last game the performance that the fullback for the Dragons had. Maybe he might not be horrible swapping one red V for another if he was to play as a fullback, because I think the Dragons nearly more than anyone need one.
They could probably swap 16 red Vs for another if they to go into the Dragons.
Yeah, St Helens were passionate. They were strong. I thought they did make a mistake trying to defend the lead early in the second half, but they did it well. The defence held up. The defensive structure is very similar to what you see out of some of the better defensive structures in the NRL. The way that they defend sort of from the inside out, whereas they'll pressure the middle, and as soon as it goes past the edges, they'll fan and push the attack towards the outside edge using the sideline as a bit of a defender there, and then post up with your second rowers and sort of create that 45 angle and try and stop the defence, like trap them into a corner. So if you do want to come back, you've got to go right back around the back of the field there to start up an attack on the other side of the field. But Penrith were a step behind, which sort of did help St Helens, obviously. But there was a couple of really noticeable mentions, I thought, for the St Helens side. Hurrell was fantastic. He grew another leg coming over here again. He's such a great character in the game of footy. Although Sirenham was fantastic as well.
I agree.
Another one that probably went too early over there and probably should still be playing in the back row in the NRL here somewhere. Mentioned Walmsley, he was fantastic. Dodd got them around the field well enough. Not a huge, didn't create huge creative opportunities, but did more than enough to get him around the field. And you already mentioned Wellesby, so that were probably my biggest takeaways from.
And old James Roby, 50 tackles.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
It's so weird because doesn't James Roby look so much like someone who'd be drinking with us at the pub on a Friday night, watching the footy, let alone playing it, and he put it in there.
Yeah.
It's like he's been in about 50 street fights, or he's been a pro boxer for 20 years with that nose. But he's obviously a tough bastard. He made 50-odd tackles, missed a couple, and still good service. Gets down nice and low, and the service off the ground is quite good, and a decent pace as well. So, obviously got another year or two in him. Let's see how he goes.
I think he's about 37 or
38.
39, I'm pretty sure.
39, yeah. I think this is
39, 20th season or something.
I was reading I think he's basically said he's waiting for his missus to tell him to stop turning up because he's going to keep going.
Yeah, right.
But
she likes him out of the house.
Yeah, you're retired a long time. But hard. The more you read about him and listen to him, hard not to like him. Speaking of service, Barney, should we get to Penrith? You may have the floor.
Yeah, it's the biggest takeaway for me. The service coming out of dummy half of Penrith was atrocious, and it led to a hell of a lot of people having to jump to catch the ball, lean down to catch the ball, lean back to catch the ball. And if you're not getting good service and being able to run onto the ball and just continue with your playmaking, you lose more than half a second in your attack, the defence is 2 or 3 steps up in your face. So you're now playing at a disadvantage. You're realistically playing up against like a 5-metre defensive line instead of a 10-metre defensive line, because the sloppy service coming out of dummy half was horrible. I don't know where Sonny Luke was. I don't know why he wasn't given an opportunity to play hooker in this game. Do you think they would have wanted to see how he's going, unless they've already earmarked him as someone who's going to be playing? Because Kenny's service was horrible, and Coggers wasn't much better when he came on either. I know he didn't play a lot of minutes, but I can't see him fitting into a number 9 role in this Penrith side. So it was drastic, the difference between what you saw out of them running on, like even their forward pack getting through.
It was almost
in the middle of the
quite
field.
confronting to watch them that slow and that disjointed.
Yeah, absolutely, and you get Yo and Cleary on the back foot, and they're just such a massive disadvantage to the outside backs. By the time they're getting the ball, the guy who's tackling them standing next to them as they're catching them. So what do you do?
Yep, it's yeah, that was the biggest takeaway for me as well. It just felt like they were playing half handicap by the way that was, and obviously they've been spoilt for 3 or 4 years now, building up to this. But this is the reality of life after him, and we said that half a step does make a difference.
But it was as bad as anyone I saw over the weekend.
Yeah.
The service out of dummy half. Like there wasn't a team out there that looked to me to have worse service coming out of dummy half than what Penrith had.
The next issue they've got, or the next, I guess, point they need to address is both tries came through the Garner-Luai side of the field. That's going to be targeted a lot this year, and they're losing, I guess, Taylor May as well.
Sure.
Is he on that side?
Well, Toto's requested to go back on the left. So
He has to, yeah, so he ends up goes back over there. So lots of work for Garner to do to get back to there as well. To be up those standard. Luai's, I think, is going to be exposed a lot in defence this year without his bodyguard.
Well, you saw Kick-Out last year. He would absolutely flatten blokes, and they wouldn't come back down that side again.
Yeah.
Like he would put proper shots on, and I can't see Garner doing that. So whether they end up pushing someone like Spencer Lenu out there as a bit of a hitman sort of bodyguard for them, or even another back rower, but someone like Sorensen or someone who can put a shot on in defence. But yeah, it's concerning signs. Go back to the preview if anyone wants to listen to my spiel on Penrith, and it was all there before here. So, yeah, they were the 2 probably biggest points that I did have of concern, and they've come out pretty glaring in this game.
Oliver.
Well, I think obviously with the signing of Garner, and I guess it is surprising they did not try to go for a like-for-like second rower compared to Kick-Out. I'm not sure how many would have been on the market at the time, but Luke Garner's biggest positives, his big positive going to Penrith is what he can do in attack. It's not necessarily defence. I don't think he's a horrible defensive player, but yeah, when you are that smaller body, it's chalk and cheese with him and Kick-Out. And I don't know. I sort of speculated during the off-season whether or not he would start straight away. I think it's pretty obvious he will start straight away, but maybe throughout the year he might be better off coming off to the bench for someone else. Obviously, Liam Martin wasn't there either. But
yeah, they do get Martin back, and potentially Hoskins might start in front of him.
Yeah, that's a chance as well. I haven't seen too much of Hoskins other than the little bit I think that we saw of him last year, but I just think Garner's mainly there for his attack, and it is a worry for Penrith. And it was just so weird to see. I think a lot of this comes back to Sony Luke and what he can bring to the table for Penrith, because I think what Mitch Kenny's career at Penrith possibly might be riding on, or at least his time in first grade in 2023 will be if he can replicate that late season combination, I guess you could say he had with Apisai Coruscant, where Kenny would start and after 20 minutes, then Coruscant would come on, and that worked, even though Kenny wasn't bad. I don't think then, but Coruscant would obviously come on when the forwards of the opposition got a bit tired and expose that a bit. It's going to be interesting to see whether they can replicate that with Sonny Luke, because if they can't replicate that, then after 3 or 4 weeks, Ivan Cleary understandably probably just going to go, well, we might as well just have Luke out there the whole time and maybe Jack Cogger on the bench to come on, or even just play Jamin Salmon as that utility, because there are options for that 14 there for Penrith, the players that I just mentioned. So I think, honestly, Mitch Kennedy's career at Penrith might be based heavily on the other hooker they got there, Sonny Luke, and whether they can work out that duo and that partnership in a way, I guess you could say.
The Cogger one's interesting in this game because I don't quite understand it, and the only way I can think it, the only reason I think he's sort of in the team is because that perhaps they thought, oh, we'll be up by 20 at half time, we'll give Nathan a rest at half time.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I don't know.
Or to play that second.
Unless he is going to be the 14. Maybe he is.
Well, it wasn't the word that he's basically meant to be what Sean O'Sullivan was, which was like not even playing first grade, but as a backup, a halfback. And he's played half in the NRL before, obviously over in Super League. So that would make sense if he was that backup half. And from the very little amount of time we saw him in the World Club Challenge, he's shown that he's definitely not a backup hooker or sort of a utility there. And if they are going to play him off the bench, which I don't think it will purely be as a half. So I think he's more probably saving for Origin time when at least Cleary's going to get picked again if he's healthy for New South Wales, right? I don't think they're going to make any drastic changes with the halfback position. So, yeah, honestly, and I think Jamin Salmon's pretty versatile as well. He can play in the centres, he can play in the halves.
Played a bit of back row. He spent a bit of time back row.
So, if it comes to it, I think, honestly, and if it doesn't work out with Kenny, I wouldn't even put Cogger in then. I'd probably just go with Jamin Salmon. And I know Salmon's been on the bench even last year, not as the utility, but as one of the forwards on the bench.
Played a bit of back row, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can just move him into that 14 role, whether it's on his back or not, as that utility player.
Positives, Barn. Look, Crichton was. I know Penrith fans were very quick to turn on Crichton, but I thought in attack he was fine. He tried a bit hard. There was a couple of times he pushed passes and offloads that he didn't need to, and we got what we expect from Bizza. So
his defensive positioning was quite good for a bloke who doesn't play fullback all the time. I thought he was in the right spot majority of the times as a fullback, so that's definitely a tick. Fisher Harris was good again. He wasn't as dominant as usual, but he was one of the better front rowers on the field easily. Leniu, I thought, been saying it for a year and a half, 2 years. He needs to be playing 40, 50 minutes. Got to get out of this 20, 30-minute mindset. I know he is very impactful for that first 10 minutes when he comes on the field, but you can't tell me he can't be playing 40 minutes. So
I think this is
the year we see it. Needs to be there. Yeah, I think it has to happen for this Penrith team. One from St Helens I missed, Sione Matautia. I thought he was fantastic for them also, but just didn't want to leave it without giving him a mention. Clear and Yo were the best two players out there for Penrith. They always are. But, the defence, Yo was the best player for Penrith easily. But he was stifled a bit in attack, but he always gets through plenty of work, and he did more than enough work again for this Penrith side. It's not panic stations for Penrith. They're not going to go out and suddenly drop out of the 8, or they're probably not even going to drop out of the top 4, to be honest. But there is a few concerns there that the coaching staff will definitely be working on, and it's around that defensive positioning on their left and out of hooker. So, and
they've lost, as we've touched on prior, they've lost their 2 assistant coaches, which can't help. Webster and Serraldo aren't there, so now I think it's Wallace and I know it isn't.
They're both doing a pretty good job by the looks of things.
Yeah, I apologise to the other bloke, but I can't think of his name now.
Webster, Andrew Webster.
No, but the other assistant coach at Penrith. Anyway, yeah, Webster's gone to Warriors, but anyway, yeah. It's funny. You suggested Penrith fans might be unhappy in the first month or so. It took one game and they were turning. They did not like Stephen Crichton after this game. There was some very interesting reaction from Penrith fans after this one.
Living in Penrith for the last 25, 30 years, we've seen it time and time again. Penrith are It's a bit like Novices, to be honest. They're not the greatest losers, and they're probably worse winners, to be honest. Some of their fans, but they they'll get what they'll still be very more than competitive. They'll probably look like the best team in the comp at different times during the year as well. But yeah, some of the supporters around the place are pretty funny. As said, they turned on Crichton very quickly. Martin was a big loss in this game. There was nobody with that high energy, aggression. Obviously, I mentioned Fish and Lenu, and they sort of brought that, but there was nobody on an edge with that sort of energy and aggression, which they were getting on both sides of the field last year, and they just seemed a bit flat on the edges with their edge back rowers in this one.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, boys?
Well, I feel a little bit sorry for St Helens, and I don't want to sound too disrespectful to the Super League, but they're going to go from this massive hive, this big competitive game against the other team that's been the best team in the world for the past couple of years that they finally got to verse and they beat. And now they got to go back to walking this league for the fifth year in a row that they have for the past 4 years.
And Super Coach teams. There's Super League teams again.
And nothing against Castleford, but they've got to go from this big World Club Challenge game against Penrith to head into the old Benderhose jungle and probably put 50 on Castleford. So you can maybe see why Jack Wellesby or someone might want to come over to the NRL sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I'll let you refresh your rum, Ollie, and we'll be back to look at the second half of this weekend. Is that? Alrighty, for those watching on YouTube, I've escaped the storm and come inside, but we might just touch on some of the social feedback we've received from the last couple of weeks where we've put out our thoughts. Ollie's at least done graphics on our thoughts on a lot of the teams leading the season and a lot of the matches since. What's some of the feedback? I'm sure they've just been all positive.
So over the past couple of weeks, we've been putting out graphics with different quotes from the podcast, mainly from the preseason preview episode, and we've got some stuff here. A couple of humorous ones first. First of all, Barney's comments on the Penrith Panthers about how he thinks they might struggle in the opening weeks of the season. In the Penrith Panthers supporter group, someone commented, "Since when does a big purple dinosaur know anything about rugby league?" And on Barney, we also had in the Manly supporter group with Barney's comments on Josh Schuster, which I don't actually think they weren't negative in any way. It was just pretty much outlining the role that you thought he was going to play as a 5'8" for Manly. Right. And someone commented, "Who is Barney?" And someone else replied, "Fred Flintstone's best friend." So we've had a reference to the Flintstones and, of course, Barney the dinosaur. Now, an interesting one. Some Canberra fans had some interesting comments about Daggy's quote, which, again, I don't think was actually too negative. No. You just spoke about how you think they're the gatekeepers for the 8. They might actually make the 8 themselves. But a fair few Canberra fans thought that they were guaranteed top 4. And someone actually went out on a limb and wanted to bet $100 with Daggy that they will finish at least 6. He's thinking realistically between 4th and 6th. And as that Raiders-Tigers game ended on the weekend, I believe you officially said you'd take him on that bet. So if he wants to go through with it, I won't.
No, he's already played.
He dialed it down a notch. He said they'll finish 7th or higher.
Okay, well, there we go.
I'll take that. That's fine.
Like that bet is a go there. And then one that's interesting, and I maybe want to get your guys' thoughts on it quickly. In the Sydney Roosters supporter group, the comments that Daggy made after the first week of the preseason, that Cheese and Victor Radley connection, which we mentioned on the show a bit earlier as well. A Roosters fan, this is coming from, which is a bit surprising, said, "Unpopular opinion, but Verrills' service is better from dummy half. Smith, a far more dynamic player, but passing game not as good as Verrills was." So what do you guys think about the comments there from someone commenting in the Roosters supporter group?
Verrills has got great service. I don't think Cheese's service is any detriment to his whole playing ability.
No.
Barn?
Yeah, I dare say it's a pretty close race, to be honest. Verrills maybe a little bit faster out of dummy half, just fractionally quicker with the ball off the ground, but he's nowhere near as destructive getting in and out with the running game coming out of the dummy half position. So I think as a whole, Brandon Smith probably one or two cogs better than Verrills, but if you're just going to talk straight out passing game, Verrills maybe 1 or 2% better, but there's very, very little between the two of them. At their best, they're pretty much the same, I think, with their service out of dummy half.
Yeah.
And I think I'll just mention quickly before we move on with the rest of the show, if anyone wants to sort of get their comment on the show or wants to speak about something on social media, the best way to do that might be commenting on the quotes that we put out or heading to the YouTube channel and putting a comment in the comment section there, because we do check and we do see the YouTube comments. So we might start implementing them as well if we get a few more of them throughout the year.
And where can we find these channels, Oliver?
Well, Footy and Frothies on Facebook and Instagram, and also Footy and Frothies, wouldn't you know it, on YouTube as well.
And Twitter
page there too. We do have discussions about some of the comments that we read, good, bad, and indifferent. But anyone who actually cares, Barney comes from Barney Rubble back in the day. But
okay.
Short, fat. My hair used to be a lot lighter when I was in high school, and we had a purple jumper at high school. So yeah, one of your mates' older brothers nicknamed me Barney Rubble way back then.
And it's stuck ever since.
It has. It's followed. I had teachers calling me Barney all through cricket. Yes, 25 years later, I'm still Barney.
Here we are. Alrighty. Well, yeah, as we said, jump on all our socials, leave us some feedback. Let's get to the Sunday night game, though. Saturday night game, in fact, after the World Club Challenge. Broncos 20 defeated the Cowboys 18 in quite a good game of rugby league, I thought, young David.
Yeah, I thought it was quite an entertaining game. To be honest, it did break down with some errors and penalties sort of getting in the way. Both teams got pretty tired at the back end, and there was some sloppy football. But as a whole, it was a very entertaining game. I don't think either team had any massive standouts except for your new man crushing Paddy Baby Carrigan. He was fantastic. Head and shoulders the best player on the field.
I've lost Guzzy now, so I need a new man in my
life. Need a new man. His defense is fantastic, running game, and the way he links that link when he plays that link role between the halves and the outside backs. He's a fantastic player, and I can see him captaining this side for a large part of his career, and possibly even captain Queensland down the track. But he's a fantastic player, and was the best player on the field in my opinion in this one.
Yep, I thought Cobbo looked good. Cobbo was up and going, dangerous absolutely. As usual. For the most part, in the right position as a fullback too. There was no glaring errors, so he's going to have that cover when Walsh is back. But a few destructive runs there, and I thought Ezra looked dangerous. I thought there could have been more points coming at times where Ezra he loves that little he loves a little barge over there trying to find that run into the opposition half because he's big enough.
He's always very busy. He's got a lot of energy when he's on the ball. And a very crisp short passing game and a short kicking game as a fact. So, yeah, he's going to be a big part of the games when they do well, of getting some points for this Brisbane side. Obviously, a big miss in with Reynolds on the sidelines. They did lack direction at different times in this team, but in this game. But I thought they were probably pretty dominant for large parts of this game. I'm not sure what that says about the Cowboys, to be honest, considering they did play big minutes for a lot of their players in this game. You mentioned Ezra and Cobbo. I thought Palacia was quite good, and Tapau made a difference. He's definitely going to strengthen up that front row rotation for this Brisbane side. Blake Moser came on for about 15, 20 minutes and did his best impression of a seagull, flapping his arms around for every tackle, man. I was just watching him. You go into dummy half and he's sitting there flapping his arms around doing the Gutho / Moses.
It must be a hooker because Blake hasn't even played first grade having a whinge. I was like, he's the least hooker-looking hooker I've seen.
Yeah, big, tall, rangy fella, isn't he? Yeah, but he did have an impact pretty much as soon as he came on. There was a couple of nice little touches that he had in and around the dummy half, but yeah, they didn't get on much of a role for him to have too much of an impact. But he did his job okay. He looks like he can defend quite well as well for a young hooker, so we'll see where that where that takes him. But for me, Payne Haas was really good. I thought he stepped up his workload compared to the week before. You had Ricky and even Corey Jensen was a standout as well for the Broncos.
He's not big, is he, Corey? I didn't realise he was out. He's not a big boy, is he?
No, he's not a huge guy. He's thick. He's a thick one, but he's not overly tall.
And I thought Capel did a good job of hunting Townsend for the night, both attack and defence. He
loves that job, doesn't he?
Yeah, scored a try down there, and then just was a bit of a pest for him for the time he was on the field.
Absolutely. The Cowboys, for me, their defensive line was so much slower than at any time last year. I don't know what that was, whether it was the thing where they were sitting back on purpose, or they just didn't have the energy to get up. But the speed of their defence was nothing compared to last year, and I think that was a big part of why they went so well last year, was because they were up in the face of the opposition, and it was noticeably slower for me. They looked a little bit softer in the middle of the field. I think that's got a little bit to do with Gilbert. I think they missed his defence in the middle of the field because he was fantastic for them at times last year. In the middle, by no means were they horrible, but they were just a couple of things for me that stood out in the way that they played. Dearden had some really nice touches. Townsend had some really nice kicks, which is obviously something they can build on through the year. Val had flashes of what he does. Val Holmes at times looks like the best player on the field, and then sort of goes missing for 20 minutes, half an hour. But he'll be someone that you probably want in your Supercoach team throughout the year, as would Carrigan. Definitely be somebody that you want to be putting in the back row.
Ollie, do you see much of this game?
But yeah, the Cowboys is a little disappointing for me.
Well, yeah, the Cowboys, they seem sort of, I guess to your point, Barney, it seems like they were sort of a gear less than they were during games last year, and that could purely be down to it being a preseason game as well, not wanting to go all out, but they were still in it. It was, for me, probably the game of the weekend. I guess it depends on the style of game you enjoy. If not, for most people, it would have been the game before this, then the World Club Challenge. But I like seeing the back and forth here. I think Brisbane were definitely the better side overall. Patrick Carrigan, best on field. I'd say, Jensen as well really surprised me. He was up there, as well as Payne Haas. That intercept from Taulagi towards the end of the game, that was one of the most frustrating intercepts I've seen, because he grabs it and then he runs a bit and slows down. If he just, I sort of know what he was doing, because the defenders were coming in again. I don't want to bag him too much, because it's the whole hindsight thing as well. But if he just got the ball and gone for it, he might have broken I think there was one defender coming across, but he sort of stagnated a bit there. So that was one of my takeaways. That was one of the more frustrating intercepts that I think I've seen. I was just thinking in my head, just go. But he didn't. Drinkwater, I think, had a good game as well. The running game from Dearden and Townsend, I thought, was pretty good as well. In terms of a halves combination running, I think they're probably the best in the competition, nearly, where both halves do have that bit of a running game in them. But yeah, I think overall for me with the Cowboys, it was just probably that being that one gear less than they usually are. They showed glimpses of it, but didn't really go too hard, just because it was a trial game, and they still nearly got the win out of it.
I thought both their front row were fantastic. Cotter and McLean was great. Cotter just goes and goes, and McLean, well, he's been one of the form front rowers now since last year, and he's come back just as good. And I think Tamo goes really well with that combination. He's going to play his half every week, and he won't let anyone down. He had some nice runs here, and they would say they saw what they need to see from your Nanais and Tamalolo's Nanai. Some sneaky stuff off dropouts. What about that dropout where he just dropped the ball, and how was that allowed to play on? But
you got to before it hit the ground.
Yeah,
it's all fair and love and warm.
That was
he's dropped it. He was looking for the corner, and he's dropped it, and he was going to get underneath it and put it up for the wingers and the centres, and he went, "Shit, there's nobody in front of me. I'll just grubber this thing off the ground." And
it was weird.
He got it just before it hit the ground.
But I can see them. I can see them using that drop out to Nanai throughout the year to try and get him up and over the top of the front rower. Yeah. So, which is clever, but they would have seen what they saw. Look, I know you were sort of against Brisbane this year, but I'm actually saying Brisbane are going to be improvers they have to be from last year where they collapsed. But I think this felt like almost a top 4 game, I'd say, and I think it's indicative.
Have been close, yeah. I think I was
not
just
a back
more
end of the year
disappointed
top 4 game
by the way that they fell apart last year. To be honest, to me that knocked them down because I did have them pegged at a sort of a 6th, 7th, 8th position at the end of last year, up until that last 4 or 5 weeks, and then I just went, well, you don't deserve to be in the top 8. So, and I've carried that through to the beginning of this year. I have seen some things that have made me sort of rethink it and think that they probably are a 7th or 8th position team. But obviously, it'll depend a little bit further down the track of how they go and injuries permitting to some of their key players. But
and they've got striker.
Cotter was one that I did want to mention, and I didn't. He was fantastic out there. And Drinkwater, I think, was probably the Cowboys' most creative player and created more opportunities than anybody else on the field. I thought he was close to their best, actually.
I think what we saw on Friday is what we're going to get on Saturday is what we're going to get from him. In that creativity is going to be through Drinkwater. Townsend's kicking will be the bread and butter, and he does it well. And Dearden will be the running half, and it'd just be how well that gels throughout the year.
Yeah, the thing with me, as I mentioned, was their defensive speed was a lot slower than I noticed from large parts of last year. And I think if they don't get that back up to speed where they were last year, they may drop a few pegs.
Yep. Yeah. Any other takeaways? I think what interests me about Brisbane is their whole backline feels like strike at their best. Cobbo, a big year for Katoni.
Tony States, big question marks.
He wasn't setting on fire again, I thought. Obviously, Cobbo, Arthurs, and they've got Pereira up their sleeve, and maybe Tristan Sailor up their sleeve. So, and Ezra bigger and stronger and better for the run last year. So they'll score points. It'll be how well their fitness and their, I guess, holds up throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're pretty spot on there. And big takeaway for me out of this one was how quiet they kept Robson. The majority of this game, considering how destructive he was against pretty much everyone last year for big parts of the game. So, and I think it's one thing I did mention that I was worried that he will be targeted this year, and it's sort of an edge that defences, if they get up in his face, can sort of take it away from, that little bit of edge away from the Cowboys.
It did feel a bit of a step down with Granville playing more minutes, Neem playing more minutes, and Gazowski being there, as opposed to Tom Gilbert, Luciano, and I think Lukey's injured as well. Lukey'd be the other one.
Yeah, Lukey wasn't.
We haven't seen. So once they get all them back, maybe there's more to come. But yeah, we'll wait and see. Probably more of a wait and see on those. Anything else here? Any super coaches or anything you want to go looking for?
Not sure what Drinkwater's price is, but if he's around the 500, he could possibly be a second backup.
He's about the third highest. He's just that bit too high for me.
If he's up there at the third highest, he's probably a bit of a worry. Cotter is not going to let you down during the year. Neem's probably a little bit underpriced and someone that might make a little bit of money early because he's going to get more minutes, obviously, with Gilbert being missing this year.
Yeah.
And if you someone you want to pick and stick with for the majority of the year, is probably someone that you could go with. He's going to score tries at different times, but don't be surprised if you get a game where he only scores 20 here and there.
I've got Nana at the moment, and he's the one I'm sort of... Yeah, I know he's going to full some 80s here and there, but also I know he might get a 12 or 13 somewhere.
Probably at fullback for the first 6 weeks. Fitness and injury prevailing is probably another one that you could put in there as a second. But you can even plug him into your centre wing, I think. So he's actually named as a centre wing. Yeah. So you can pick him in either in one of your centre wing positions or at fullback. And I don't think he's going to let you down. Covering Reece Walsh there for the first 6 or 8 weeks.
Anything else, Ollie?
No, not really.
Sunday kicked off with the Storm 24 defeating the Warriors 6, and it was absolutely standard Warriors performance. They turned up for about 53 minutes, and that was it. Right on 50 minutes, Warbrick scored. There you go. and that was when Harry and Munster sort of decided it was time for them to go and, be Harry and Cam for a bit, and led to a
they
lot of
sat
points.
back for a big part of this game, didn't they? Harry Grant was sort of probing, but Munster and Hughes just sort of sat back and played in dinner suits, the pair of them. Some lovely touches. They both put on a very nice try each with Munster and Hughes with their ball-playing games. But the Warriors were in this game for a really long time. Like 50 to 60 minutes, as you mentioned, and I think they were probably dominant through the forward pack for quite majority of that time as well. Like they were winning the middle of the field for at least the first half and a chunk of that second half. They just didn't have anybody to capitalise on the opportunities at the back of it. Like I love Sean Dawson.
They could have used Martin and Metcalf, couldn't they?
But yeah, I've loved Sean Dawson for a very long time, but his last 4 or 5 years are a shadow of what he used to be. Question marks in defence with him has been all throughout his career, and his attack is waning as well. So how long it takes to see if they do sort of maybe swap him in and out with the 14 coming in and taking some of his minutes or something, I don't know. The two big glaring errors from Sean Johnson was missing touch twice. Like that's a massive turnaround when you've got a fresh set at 6 and you could be 40 metres downfield and then you don't hit the touchline and the other team gets the ball back. Like, let's just talk about a swing in momentum, and that's basic errors that the bloke that's played, 240 games or something should never be making. So, that was a big takeaway for me. The Warriors' errors killed them, especially when they did try to go to their outside backs. It was a lack of creativity and errors just absolutely killed them in this. Melbourne was sort of off the bit for about 15, 20 minutes. They didn't look competitive for the first sort of 15 minutes. I was a little bit worried there. I thought they might have got beaten in this one, and a better team might have put some points on early, but this Warriors team just couldn't seem to get over the line. Melbourne kicked back in after about 20 minutes and just got back into the grind and do what Melbourne do. Nelson was massive. Nelson was the best player on the field. Another one that just absolutely stood out. So if you're looking for a front rower in Supercoach, I don't care what he's going to cost you. There's going to be games where he's going to probably hit 80 most weeks, with especially carrying this pack now. Like there's not a lot of help for him. So he's going to be playing big minutes and going to have to carry this pack. I thought he was tremendous. There's a couple of the Warriors that stood out. Egan was decent, as was Tohu Harris. I thought, they're never going to shirk their workload. Barnett and Fanua Blake were probably the best two players for the Warriors. But yeah, they've got some real issues in their outside backs. Like they can get up the field. They're going to compete again. It's been a similar story for them for the last probably 5 years. Yeah, they compete through the middle of the field, even win the middle of the field, and then once they start going looking for points out wide, there's either errors or lack of creativity, and then they turn the ball over, and then their defence out there's not much chop either. So
yeah,
see how they go.
Yeah. Agree with everything you said. I thought, like the Melbourne forward pack were. Well, I thought outmatched, as you said, for the first half probably, but hung in there okay. Some of a more creative team making him chase 18 might have been interesting. But some positive signs. Will Warbrick looks like he'll be a try scorer. I assume he's going to get the starting spot. Big body, took some people with him to score out wide there. Look, Meaney still feels he's obviously a low A grade Pappenhausen, but didn't necessarily have a lot of spark. Maybe that Faolungo isn't far away from getting a crack in if they struggle the first few weeks. But
he's still on a development contract, as far as I know, Faolungo. So we're not going to see. You probably won't see him till halfway through the year unless they upgrade him into the top 30 in the next week.
Yeah. But as we saw, once Harry decided it was time to go, he got him on the front foot and away they went.
Looks like a different bloke with the skinhead, doesn't he?
Yeah, I know. Once they
2 or 3 times they've gone, Harry's away. I'm like, that's not Harry Grant. Oh, yes, he is. Hang on.
But they and that's where they'll like those 3 blokes will win them games like this most weeks. So look, they'll be fine. They're probably just that shade under last year, but we know where they sort of sit. They probably should be better for the run again, but lots on Nelson's shoulders, as you said, Ollie.
Yeah, well, I thought this game really felt to me like it was just Melbourne kind of playing with their food a bit, not to be too disrespectful to the Warriors, but once, as you guys said, Munster Hughes and Harry actually decided to turn it on, which I felt like they could have done it a little bit earlier if they wanted to, but when they decided, all right, that we got to get serious and actually win this game, once that happened, it all completely flipped and everything was really going Melbourne's way for them. What I will say about the Warriors, though, is obviously they've made a fair few signings for this season, a few on the forwards as well, but I thought all of their new forwards were at least solid in this game. It's not good. Ford was decent. Barnett had a really good game, as mentioned, and so did Niokore. Niokore's hit on Panay was a good little wake up, because for about the first 20 minutes there was a whole lot of not much going on, and then all of a sudden, bang, and you could feel the sort of change in atmosphere with the fans at the ground as well. So I feel a bit for Kossi, though, at that point where the 40-20 was going and he nearly got there and he got the ball and then he just slipped and went into touch, unfortunately. But I guess, and as you guys know, I'm tipping the Warriors for the spoon and I still am, but I guess it's positive signs that the players that they have invested in, at least so far, look like they're going to produce something for them this year.
Yeah, fair. We've probably covered off everything there.
Yeah, Lisi Katoa had a pretty good game, I thought. I think he's edged himself in front of Tarek Sims now, so wouldn't be surprised if he gets a starting spot over Tarek Sims. And
I think I read that. I do think I read that Sims will be off the bench if he's not injured. I think he won't even be carrying injury.
The Storm, for me, I think a majority of it comes off the back of Harry Grant, because you didn't really see Munster and Hughes get involved until it came off the back of a Harry Grant scoot out of dummy half, you know what I mean? So unless the forwards are being dominant, I think it's going to take a bit of Harry Grant to sort of break a few games apart. So I think they're probably a cog or two down on where they have been over the last few years, and they're going to settle sort of in and around that 4th to 8th position rather than being at the top of the comp this year. But they'll still be good enough to put away a lot of teams.
Yeah. Tigers 36 defeated what I'm told is a top 4 team in the Raiders to 4. Ollie, you can have first crack at this.
I'll address it straight away that Canberra did field a bit of a weaker side in the second half compared to the first half, which may have contributed a little bit to just how easily the Tigers were able to run away with this game in the second half. But Adam Doueihi looked absolutely amazing in this game. Now, I know I've been skeptical about how they let Jackson Hastings go, and now they're back with the problem that they were for the 5 years before that, and that's what to do with Luke Brooks and the pressure that'll be on Luke Brooks. Well, if Adam Doueihi can consistently put in a performance like that, I don't think it's going to be enough to sort of beat your better sides in the competition, but definitely the sides that they're sort of going to need to beat to maybe not make the bottom 4 or to have that sort of respectable finish. I think if he can put that out, then they should be fine in doing that. I was impressed by Junior Tupou as well. I thought he had a great game coming on. I thought Papier and Clemmer were fine, but I think a lot of it and we don't say this a lot about the Tigers, but their back 5 was solid, especially in attack. They were amazing, and I think it was the service that Doueihi was able to give them out of 5'8". And again, I've addressed this last year as well, and I went and looked at the stats today, but when you're a team and you've only got one player, and again, I get it's because they took some players off at halftime, but when you've only got one player gaining over 100 metres in the game, it's very hard to win the footy game. And I believe that was Matt Tomoko was the only one for Canberra to get over 100 metres, and especially when I think every single one of the Tigers back 5 gained at least 100 metres, well, you're going to be in for a bit of a tough day there. Highlight of the game for me was Jack Whiten completely forgetting what a football looked like and being scared of that ball. We were watching the game at the Gums together and got a bit of a laugh out of it. And it wasn't that he sort of had a late reaction and then tried to catch the ball. It seemed like he looked at the ball, looked at the pass coming and decided, I'm going to try and avoid this and sort of try to move out of the way. And that just seemed
it was all right. He literally looked at the football and went, "What the fuck is that?" and just let it in him. It was hilarious.
It was quite a good ball too. It was as good a ball as he could have. Yeah. Anyway.
That was honestly probably Canberra's highlight or low light for the game. Someone else I wanted to mention as well, Alex Twal, of course, coming back as well this season from an injury last year too. And he was great before he was out as well. A good performance from him here.
He will score a try this year. Convinced. I was pretty happy with the Tigers' defence overall. I want to caveat by saying, look, Raiders had a good 20 minutes at the start where they were in attacking position.
20 minutes, half an hour.
And their attack looked pretty average, I thought. And in that time, they did have their full-strength team on the field. I was, obviously, like I said, I was happy, but when you look back on it, they didn't ask any questions, did they? I don't know what to say about the Raiders. They felt sluggish. I know they played a different backline to the week before, but they still had the same problems. I think they felt a bit slow at times. Some of these guys, there wasn't a whole lot of there wasn't any creativity. Puppy had a couple of okay runs. Tapane did try very hard, as he does. I can't.
He took, but what did he take? Puppy off after 20 and Tapane off after 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And they were not competitive again.
No, that was it. Yeah, that was pretty much it. I was happy with the Tigers. Obviously, they looked a happy team, as I said, opposed to the Dragons and what we saw the Tigers last year. But it was great to see. Look, it was great to see Clemmer ball playing. He thought it was Pat Carrigan for a bit through the middle, throwing it around at first receiver at times. But I liked what I saw.
Maybe he's going to take Luke Brooks.
He might. I think what we're going to see realistically, and now we will know soon. And actually, in fairness, Wakeham was 100 times better than the week before. He looked pretty good now. He's at a train.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see Dewey play as the dominant half, and Brooks will be sniffing around offloads and just try.
It'll be better for Brooks.
100%. And we'll see some. Back to what you said, Luke Brooks is some sort of inside-out grubbers for the fullback and plays like that, as opposed to trying to be a fullback that's going to just
running at an edge,
and hoiking it up on the field on the last. I think we'll see a better Luke Brooks this year. But Simpkins has looked great both games. He looks, as I said earlier, a different player, and I really liked what I saw, as you said, about the back five. And the back five all looks stronger. Naden looks broader and bigger and stronger.
Much bigger in the chest.
Poa looks like a monster. I thought it was Matamua when he scored that try. He was massive out wide there. And there was a better hit out for Tommy Talau. So I think pace and size in your backline is a big thing, as I've said a couple of times tonight, and they've now got it. They have to turn up and play first grade next week. But, exciting times. It's refreshing, at least for now, I'd say, Barn. What did you take from this?
Yeah, well, the Raiders will be better when Tapane and Papali are playing an hour and 80 minutes. With them, they'll definitely make a bit of a difference, stiffen up that middle of the field. But as you mentioned, their outside backs look slow. Their halves look very uncreative. Fogarty tried really hard and did have a couple of nice touches. And young Sami Solo played quite well through the middle of the field for the Raiders as well. But other than those two, mate, there was a very poor performance out of this Raiders team. But Levi had a couple of flashes there. Looks like he may even take over that hooking role. I'm not sure about what's happening with Wolford, but he did look quite fit and good in there. And Tomoko was the best of their outside backs. But, there's issues. There's quite a lot of issues in this Raiders team. And you don't have to look real hard to find them, I don't think, to be honest. Like, you look at that second rotation of forwards once Tapane and Papali'i went off the field, they didn't look competitive whatsoever in the middle of the field.
I think it speaks for itself that they've now gone back and dragged Emre Gula out of nowhere when they didn't want anything to do with him last year. And no disrespect to him, because he does a fair enough job, but they've had to move.
Horsburgh's going to have good games, but there's a depth issue in the middle of the field for the Raiders for sure, and their outside backs. They've got a decent 17, and if that 17 have a good week, they'll win. But as soon as they start going towards any depth in this team, they're probably one of the teams with the least amount of depth that I can see out of a lot of.
Yeah.
Tigers were, you mentioned pretty much everyone from the Tigers that I wanted to mention. Junior Tupu, both you boys have mentioned him. I thought he was outstanding and
I'd be playing him. I'd be starting him.
Apart from Dewey, close to the best player on the field. I'm pretty sure he's locked up that spot now. And I don't think anyone mentioned Alex Safer, but I thought he was fantastic as well. Did a lot of work in the middle of the field. He loves that stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah.
You need a bloke in there that does that constantly, puts his head where you wouldn't put your feet and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And he was fantastic. But Clemens' ball playing was outstanding, actually. Haven't seen him play like that for a long time. Back when he was when he first came into the New South Wales team, he used to do a fair bit of ball playing and offloading, but he hasn't done that for a long time. And if it's going to be encouraged in this Tigers team, I think he had a fantastic year last year, and he may even be better again this year.
Especially, and I think he's the third best Supercoach prop, and if he's throwing in an extra 3 or 4 offloads under your point tally, cool.
Right.
And have made a point of making him the forward leader. They keep hammering that, so I hope he has a great year. Obviously, I would be going with Tupou. I imagine he's similar, and I imagine no Flume is incumbent, but I wouldn't be unhappy to see him just start Staines in a wing. I thought he was pretty good too. But yeah, we'll see what next week brings. Anything else from this?
Hudson Young.
Oh, yeah.
Hudson Young was good again. Always is. It was a step below his usual performance, but he'll be fantastic for them during the year.
And no concerns, Young and Tapane, if you want them in Supercoach?
No, absolutely not. Tapane's be one of the probably, I dare say, be one of the most picked front rowers in the game. He adds a point of difference too. He's got things that a lot of the front rowers don't have. He's got a step. He can beat blokes. He can bust tackles, and he's got an offload as well. So he'll be one of the best performing props by the end of the year again, I would imagine.
We get to the next game, which is 36-16. The Sharks defeated the Bulldogs, and the rise in grade for the Bulldogs probably showed them up a little bit, I thought, Barney.
Well, they came out flying. They were in front for that first 5 or 10 minutes, but it was a professional performance from the Sharks. I was actually really impressed, to be honest. I know it's only a trial game, but the way they were able to turn them away early for that first 10 or 15 minutes and absorb that pressure, and then they just went about their work. They started carving up through the middle of the field and just putting the Dogs on the back foot. Nico started kicking early, turning them around, keeping the ball in play, which obviously tired out a lot of their players. And it's a game plan that they used for big parts of last year. They like to keep their ball in play. I'm pretty sure they consider themselves as one of the fittest teams in the comp, and they like to play that up-tempo football and just grind you down and work you out that way. Lulatano is quickly becoming one of the biggest shit-talking players in the game. Like, the way he gets in a one-on-one and just starts talking rubbish and stirring up his opposition, it's obviously something that gets him going, because he generally starts playing well when he starts doing it. But in this one, he was taking on Avarillo and Kiros, and he did it for the entire game, talking rubbish to him. He basically telling him the whole game that he's better than him and he's going to do this and do that. You could see the way that they were reacting. And he had a fantastic game. Don't get me wrong, but he's going to put a lot of people offside.
He's obviously one of those blokes that I think needs to get into that niggle to say.
Well, apparently he's one of the nicest.
I'm sure he
in
is,
the world. If you listen to people when he's not on the football
I'm sure he just
field,
goes
he's
like his
one of
way
those
of
blokes.
getting the best out of himself to say, "I'm better than you, motherfucker."
Well, it seems to me, because he does like a lot of work in the community and that. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if he's won, but he's been nominated for a couple of Ken Stephen medals.
He won the Ken Stevens medal the other year.
Yeah, and he obviously does all this stuff outside of the game and is very good with fans and that it just seems like he has all this effort and energy put into just being a really good human being, that at some point he's just got to,
just got to get it out.
Negative energy out, and what better place than in his opposition number's face? So.
It's just that one-on-one. He just absolutely loves it. And he just likes to obviously tell the bloke he's playing against that he's better than him, and then goes out and tries to prove it. He did. He betted both of them in this one. But I thought the Sharks were pretty much dominant in most aspects of the game. After 15, 20 minutes, especially through the middle of the field. This is what I was talking about with the Cowboys in the preview. their defensive line speed is fantastic, and their attacking line speed is fantastic. Just the leg drive and speed that they have through the middle of the field. They're a little bit smaller forward pack, but they are mobile as hell. They get in and around the ball, and the speed that they take the ball to the defensive line. But they gain 2 or 3 metres over most teams just because of the leg drive and the speed that they have getting through the middle of the field, which obviously just gives more time and space for Nico and Moylan to do their thing and set up their outside backs. And there's plenty of strike out there as well. I thought Kennedy was fantastic in this game. That try-saving tackle was tremendous on Avarillo, the way he got in under the ball at the last second. And he obviously had to think about the way he did it. Did it fantastic. But, the last 20 minutes or so, the Sharks pulled a lot of their players off and, knocked it down a gear or two, and the Dogs came back and scored a try or two. Nobody's going to be too upset about that, I don't think. The head knock for Kikau was probably a bit of a turning point for the Dogs as well.
Definitely. He looked real good.
Because they were going there from the very start of the game. You could see it was going to be a focal point for the majority of the game, and he will terrorise some teams during the year. But, and he probably would have kept them a little bit closer in this one as well. They struggled a bit for creativity again. Obviously, it's been the knock on Flanagan for his entire career, and Burton sort of got bogged down a little bit. I think it was the speed of the Sharks line just getting up and in his face, and he took his time away to make the decisions, which it really hurt the Dogs' attacking game. But they weren't really given a platform either. There was nobody kicking down the front door of the Sharks and running through the middle of the field. So it doesn't help when you get put in that kind of position. Young Preston looks probably the best of their forwards again, and pretty sure he's signed himself into a spot in this 17 going forward, and he may even end up breaking into the starting team by the end of the year. Fatala Mariner and Thompson were decent through the middle of the field, and Sutton looks like he's going to add something at different points depending on how they're playing, but he definitely did add something there. And Max King is just, I think he's now just stamped himself as probably one of the top, 20 front rowers in the comp.
Yeah.
Like, he just gets through, does his work, and does it week in, week out. He's probably not going to burn any team at all, but he's, it's all right. Funamona Brown added a bit of spark when he came on. And I think Skelton came on, played centre. It's probably a better proposition than Avarillo to play centre. But whether they do that or not, I don't know. But he's got some size about him and a bit of pace, so he may end up finding himself a centre position at some point.
Ollie.
Well, this game sort of reaffirmed something to me that I said a couple of times last year, and I thought last year on their day, Cronulla's best 5 for me is the best in the comp, at least when they're on, watching them play. Like even Will Kennedy, and I think Kennedy sort of brings it together a bit. But that was also off the back of, I thought Nico was good, and I thought Matt Moylan was decent in this game as well. And they definitely played their part in getting the good ball out there to the edges. It was heartwarming to see Josh Reynolds in a Bulldogs jersey scoring a try at Belmore Oval. I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but the ball boy even ran in. And
he did. He was the first one there.
So that was great to see. I'm not sure if the Dogs are playing a game at Belmore at some point during the year. They probably are, but I'd love to see.
They've got 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, the last couple of years they've had a couple of back to Belmore things.
Yeah, and again, I think the Dogs did hang in there for a good while until sort of, I'd say, towards the end of the first half, and then it just sort of opened up a bit. I know as we're watching the game as well together, but Barney, you mentioned a couple of times that it just seemed like it was clear to see that Cronulla had the class there and were simply the better team, but the Bulldogs were just sort of clinging on, it seemed, and
they're having a go.
They were having a go and they were trying to keep on their level, but at some point the class just overcomes it. Realistically, this is what we could have been saying about the Dragons if they put in their effort, which was they just got outclassed by a better team. But that's not only what happened; they were objectively very poor in that game. But the Bulldogs, I think they put in the effort probably that should have been put in by the Dragons, and they showed that it can be done. And there are very promising signs for the Bulldogs heading into this season. But again, probably 1-7 realistically. The Sharks were great, especially the back five, and the halves just did what they needed to in this game. I know Nico can get better, and again, because it's a trial, wasn't at his very best, but I'm sure he will be come round one, and he was still
Had
good.
20 minutes off as well, which doesn't help the stats. The left-hand edge was okay. Talakai was quite good, I thought. They gave him a little bit more ball this time. But he sort of shoveled it on to Mulatano a few times, which led to him scoring tries. The catch over the top of Avarillo was a really nice one on Mulatano as well. But, Nico was easily the best on ground. Did it in a bit of a can. I think he packed up at about half time, to be honest, and then they gave him the last 20 off as well.
Yeah, well, when they took half the side, most of the side off, as you said, with 20 to go.
Yeah. I talked earlier about Souths being a constant, but I suppose you've got to say Sharks are too. Sharks are.
Looks like it. Yeah, looks like they've come back the same way they left before the semis kicked off last year. So
Teague Wilton looked good too, actually, as anyone probably you haven't mentioned yet.
Jack Williams.
Are good. They were good.
Back through Nakora.
Well, it's funny you bring up those two. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but heading into round one, Sharks versus Rabbitohs first up. Just looking at the draw in round one, that might be probably the prediction for maybe game of the round. Just the style of those two teams and what we can expect from those two teams this season. They seem both guaranteed for finals and possibly pushing late into the finals as well. So they'll both be looking for a big start. Yeah.
You put up I think I saw a graphic again today about how you put up you think Bulldogs are nearly a top 8 team, or in that borderline one ahead of some other teams. Perhaps Barney have suggested a higher. Realistically, you watch this game, they're outclassed by the Sharks. They've picked up 2 players in Kikau and Marnie, and 2 good players. But I still think there's question marks there. I'm not convinced they're suddenly going to burst into this team that's going to win 8 straight.
I don't
Avarillo at the
so
centre is
either.
an issue. Alamote is going to be a very good player. He's stealing a kid. Perham looked clunky. Better word for it. And
I'm not sure he's a fullback, to be honest. I think he's a centre or a winger.
So they've got that idea. Fox barely touched the ball, and obviously, a plan to kick away from him, which is smart, And Flanagan's
keep it out of his hands.
Flanagan's still a big question mark, and I've seen plenty of Bulldogs fans commentary already calling for Reynolds to may as well play 7.
Reynolds to play.
So there's still question marks there. Is where I'm going. I don't think necessarily going to jump 6 spots.
I think they may. Yeah, at their best, they'll finish 7th or 8th, and at their worst, probably 14th. So they're going to be in and around. I don't think they're finishing the bottom. Just through who they've brought in and the way that the team looks structured, I think they'll be pretty okay to jump out of that bottom 4 mark. But yeah, anywhere between 13th and 8th. I think they will get on a run at some point. Probably not going to be 8 games in a row, but I think there might be a month where they go unbeaten, and it might just get them into that 8th position come the end of the year.
Ollie.
Yeah, well, I don't actually think if I had to say, I'd tip them to miss the 8, but I feel like they seem set to be that sort of team in and around the periphery, maybe a couple of games off or something. And a lot of it does come down to as well, I think there are a fair few teams beneath that just don't have that same quality coming in. The halfback position is the big outlier here, I think, and fullback as well. Although Hayes Perham, I still want to see a little bit from him first during the first few weeks of the season. But just from what I saw last year and when they were actually able to sort of open up the play a bit and throw the ball around and be a bit less structured, it'll be interesting to see how Serraldo sort of implements that this year with Mick Potter still being there. And I think as well that edge, Burton, Kickout and Addo-Carr, I think definitely against your sort of lower table teams, they're going to be able to exploit some edges heavily here and some very weak edge defenses. I mean, my God, I shudder to think about what they're going to do to the Titans when they verse during the season. But I think some of it comes down to lack of quality with the teams below them. and who they've brought in, and the service out of dummy half from Reed, even though Flanagan's not been great, but especially for Burton as well, it doesn't completely excuse you not having a halfback, but I feel like it does make up for that a little bit. And come to think of it, maybe even for the Tigers as well, especially if Dewey can play as he did the other week with Coruscant in there, that's only going to be beneficial to the Tigers as well, not having that out-and-out half. So I feel like Reed's going to be quite a big buy for the Bulldogs this year. I'll be a bit bullish and say maybe even a bit bigger than Kickow, even though I'm expecting Kickow to have a big year as well. But I think a lot of it does come down to these blokes coming into a side that impressed during the second half of last year and being able to build on that. Again, I'm not saying top 8. I'm saying they are a chance. I would not be surprised if they snuck in. I more agree with Barney. I think the parameters probably more, I'd say 8th to 12th. I'd say I'm pretty confident they won't make bottom 4 either.
Yeah. We're both on record last week what we thought of Reed, so we'll move on. Anything else to say? I think I've flicked Burton from my Supercoach. He's a bit mid for me at the moment. We'll see if they get hot later in the year. Any other Supercoaches you want to talk about? Obviously, Nico speaks for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Nico, if you pick him, you have to stick with him for the entire year, or you're going to wait probably 6 weeks and hopefully he drops a bit of money early at the season and then you can pick him up a little bit later. I mentioned Jack Williams and Teague Wilton. They're probably someone worth looking at for maybe a bench spot in your back row. Brayley's not going to set the world on fire, but if you're just looking for a steady, maybe backup hooker, but it's probably priced out of it, to be honest. Someone like Kao Iro, if he gets a spot down during the year through injury, he's someone you definitely want to snap up as soon as. If he looks like he's going to get a run of 3 or 4 games in a row, then you'd be buying him straight away. If he gets a spot, Mulatano is probably, if you're looking for a winger that's going to score a lot. As I mentioned earlier in the year, I think he's going to go close to being one of the best wingers in the game by the end of this season. So, barring injury, I think he's someone that you might want to pick up, and then he's going to be a focal point of the attack for the Sharks. So, someone that I think you could rely on for a majority of the time. The forwards are all sort of, they're much of a muchness. They're going to be competitive, but they're probably not going to be better than a lot of other players that you can pick out of other teams. The Dogs, Kickow's someone that he will be a focal point for the Dogs. They will be going there constantly, and he probably will score a lot of tries this season. So there will be games where he'll get boosted scores. If Fox moves to fullback at some time during the year, which I know there's been speculation now for more than a year of him going back there, but for mine, as I said, I think they'd probably be better suited to put Parham on the wing and move Fox back to fullback. And then if that happens, it'd probably be worth looking at. But I'm not sure there's Max King as a backup front row as someone that you probably want to put into your team. But there's not probably a great deal more that I'd be looking at out of the Bulldogs.
And we wrap up the round with 40-16. The Titans welcome the newbies to the comp. And Ollie, you can have the first crack at it.
Well, Tino really needs to step up, doesn't he? I think he was atrocious in this one. No, Tino was very good in this game, shock and horror. But someone I do want to mention straight off the bat, because I've been very critical of him pretty much ever since he started playing first grade, but a good game, I think, from Tana Boyd. And if he's going to be starting this year, the Titans are going to need him to be performing. And if he can put that up alongside Foran, who, again, I don't think Foran went all out, and I do not want him to be going in a trial. Based off of his history, I thought Verrills was good as well. I've got here young Pereira, obviously the person who everyone's talking about coming out of this game, scoring 4 tries. I've got here, if he can make at least 2 tackles a game and miss less than 18, he can start, because then he's already better than the rest of the other ones that we've got. But the back 5 as a whole for the Titans, including the ones that I like to bag, at least in attack, were amazing. And I guess the story is going to be the same for the Titans this year as it has been the past couple of years. They were able to execute it a bit better in 2021 than they were in 2022. But the Titans are a horrible defensive team, but they do have really good attacking in them, and they can score points. And for them, I think this year it's going to be high scoring games, and it's just going to be if they can outscore their opponents. There were some games that broke my heart last year where they lost games 40-38 or something like that. But if they can get at least their attack down pat, they should hopefully be winning some of these shootouts, I guess you could say. AJ just seemed to pop up everywhere. Sometimes a dummy half, great support play as well from AJ. I thought he was terrific. Fafita, I've got to mention, I thought he was good. Obviously, that runaway that he got sort of built up his meters a fair bit. Fermor was solid. Most of the Titans side was good, but I don't think that the Dolphins were too great at all. And I feel like not maybe to the same extent entirely, but sort of that Rabbitohs Dragons game, the Titans were able to look great in attack because the defense from the Dolphins ultimately was poor. I think, but I can't really complain. Pereira looks like a promising prospect, and I wouldn't mind if he got a crack first up. The Titans do have options there with Sammy able to play on the wing or in the centres as well. I think Shoop will start in the centres definitely as well.
Yeah.
And I like the way that Jojo Fafita looked as well. So again, all positive signs so far, but got to take it with a grain of salt. Not only that it's a trial, but also I think the Dolphins were pretty poor.
I agree with you said about Tanner Boyd, and I like the spine. I think a couple of running options there, all of them are pretty much running halves, and running half to running half looked pretty good here. And our biggest concern when we did the preview was their back line, and they've got a back five that looks completely different to what they had last year. So they have addressed it. You've got two outside backs with size and pace, and you've got Shoop who adds a little bit of both.
He's a defensive centre.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So our big, or at least my big negatives coming into the year, they've addressed or tried to address, and right now you got to say they've done a pretty good job with it. And yeah, to see Tino, Jolliffe, and Fafita all have high meters, and Mo another 120 off the bench. You at least you know what you get there. So that was the other concern, size of the bench, and Joe Stimson added to this team gives you at least a big body, and McIntyre do a job. So they've addressed a lot of my concerns, at least to start with. Barn, what were you
they've addressed a lot of mine as well, but I still think that they were flattered a fair bit by
100%.
by the Dolphins' defence, not just on the edges, quite glaringly through the middle as well, which I didn't expect to come from this Dolphins team. I thought their defence in the middle would be at least a little bit better, but Titans look slick. Don't get me wrong. Foran looked $1 million. He looked fitter than I've seen him for a long time. His ball playing was quite good. He only got involved when he had to. He could have had a much bigger part to play in this game, but he didn't really need to. So he just sat back and let Tanner Boyd take over. Tanner looked quite good running the ball. There's still an issue for me with their last tackle options. Going to cause a few problems for this team. I'm not sure they've got an out-and-out brilliant kicker in the team, so the end of sets is going to be a little bit of an issue.
Probably showed when Jaden Campbell was doing a lot of that.
Yeah,
came on. I know that's gone off, but yeah.
They now have two athletic young wingers that are just natural try scorers by the look of them. Jojo Fafita and Cam Pereira both look like just natural finishes on an edge. So you get them a half a one-on-one chance, I think they're going to convert half of those. So that only adds points to a team that already could score points. Shoop is a much better defender than anyone that they've had in the centres for the last few years. So that sort of narrows down a few points of attack for the opposition realistically. So whoever's in the opposite centre to Shoop's probably going to get a lot of traffic sent his way during the season, because I think they'll choose to rather go that way than go at Shoop. Don't get me wrong, they'll test both sides of the field, but yeah, I can see the other side opening up more than Shoop's side will. They look like a well-oiled machine at times. Verrill's service was fantastic. He got the forwards onto the ball. They look like a different team to the team that was running around the week before playing the Cowboys. I know they did push the Cowboys last week, but they looked so much better in this game. Yeah, Verrills and Foran made this team look like a much better ball-playing team than the one that was out there the week before. As for the Dolphins, mate, look, Kenny Bromwich did his job, so did Nichols. they've been there for years and they've done their job every week. That's what you expect. Jeremy Marshall-King was probably the best of the forwards and probably close to the best of the players for the Dolphins. Sullivan did a decent job. He tried really hard. But the more I see of Anthony Milford, the more I'm convinced that the bloke should be nowhere near a first-grade team.
They should just pull the trigger on Katoa, to be honest.
I've been saying it for 3 or 4 years. Obviously, they want to blood the kid slowly. I can't see Milford lasting more than 3 or 4 weeks, but who knows? Benny seems to love him and he may keep him there for half the season. But Katoa didn't look that much better either, though, to be honest, when he did get on there. There's probably some nerves there, and he is only a young kid, but Milford was not good. I thought Wallace was probably the best of the forwards, and SASA put in a decent stint for the Dolphins. But, yeah, their outside backs were all over the shop. Considering you've got blokes like Hamiso, Izako, Tessie New that all had big raps on them at different places, and Broncos and wherever, and then you come and put them all together, and they just look like a rabble.
And I understand. Look,
no idea where they were.
Literally the first time they ever played together, but you would have thought at least something more would come from that.
But they've been playing. You've played centre for your majority of the time you played footy. You played wing or you played fullback. You should know where you are and how you're trying to defend against someone who's running. It's not like there's a bloke out there doing fucking circles and he's 10 times faster than anybody on the field.
Yeah.
They're running pretty much the same lines that everybody else runs every week, and they just got showed up massively, horribly in defence. And it's probably been the biggest knock on the 3 that I mentioned and pretty much anybody else in that back 5. While they may have some talent in attack and they look like they can do some good things with ball in hand, it's always been their issue has been defence. So Titans may not be the worst outside backs defence this year if the Dolphins are going to be in the comp. So I can see a lot of points being put on. If they're going to play like that with Sako, Tessie New, Hammerside out there trying to defend on the edges, the Dolphins could concede a lot of points through the centres and the wings this year.
And it was at times, even and I hate to say it, but that forward pack at times looked old.
Yeah, they look slow.
Simple as that. They're not a quick forward pack, they're not a mobile forward pack. Kenny was probably the best of them, and I don't know. It's I agree with what you said. And the youngsters. Look, I'm still sort of impressed by Bostock. Looks like he'll get a start with apparently Edric Lee's injured.
Yep.
So probably a Supercoach sniff there. Now, the other Supercoach spruik of the year, Valence Tawari, came on the field halfway through, and I dead set thought one of the reserve grade props had wandered out to the wing because the bloke looked like he'd skipped half a pre-season. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, but he was cooked after about 3 minutes and then blooded out in the wing after that, and then had Pereira run straight past him twice. So not for me yet, but, put it that way. But for the spruik on him, don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. Anyway.
Yeah, he obviously scored a few tries last year just running over the top of people because he definitely wasn't beating them on the outside or with pace.
No.
You're talking Supercoach. Carl Barrera, if he gets a spot in this team, is someone that you're going to be putting in your centre wing straight away because if he has one game where he scores 3 or 4 tries, he makes you 50 to 100 grand straight away if he's a bottom dollar player coming out of it. Jojo's another one. He's going to be a little bit more expensive because he was a little bit exposed, obviously, last year, but someone that probably will score points and score you some and pick up some money during the year. David Fafita's a funny one. He's hit and miss. He'll have games where he'll score 150 and he'll have games where he might get 30 because he decides he's not going to have a crack. Wallace is probably going to be the leader for the Dolphins team, so he's going to average at least what he's tossed it at and more. I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of lifts his average up to somewhere 60, 65 and probably a good shout for a front row position for the Dolphins. Sullivan as a backup fullback, backup halfback, because there will be games where the Dolphins are half decent. He'll be the only one that's setting up points for this side. So I can't see Milford doing it.
Yeah,
it may take Katoa a couple of weeks before he gets up and running when they finally decide to give him a start. So he might be someone you might look at, but I'm not 100% sure. Jeremy Marshall-King probably someone that you could lock in as a second hooker coming out of Dolphins because, he's going to do a job most weeks. Super standouts, apart from probably the wingers from the Titans. Oh, and Tino. Tino, set and forget. Just buy him, put him in your front row or his back row and just fucking leave him there for the year.
Yeah. Ollie, you must be feeling good about it. I know you're naturally such an optimistic person when it comes to the Titans, but you must be feeling pretty good.
Well, here's the thing, that if we've learned anything, it's obviously social media is always right. And of course, I've been checking social media because I want to know exactly what's going to happen this NRL season so I can bet on it and make lots of money. Of course, I'm not actually telling anyone to go out and bet based off of social media. However, if social media is correct, then one thing is we should base all of our predictions off of what happened during the trials, because I've especially seen today some people give certain bits of advice and predictions based off of the 2 games that we've seen from every club so far in the trials. And 2, obviously social media has told us that Canberra's making the top 4. So if we're basing everything off what we've seen in the trials plus Canberra's making the top 4, then surely it's a Titans-Tigers grand final, right? Because if Canberra's making the top 4 and we're basing everything off of how teams did during the trials, then I think we might be.
Happy days. I mean, well, that's it. But that's our wraps for all of that. So next week, we've got our preview coming up.
Yes.
After that, we get back to our weekly shows and we'll review everything from the first round. We do have the return of all our normal segments. We'll have a salute, a slap, a pot plan of the week for those that have just chimed in. That's for the player of the round that could have been replaced by a pot plant and it would have done at least as good a job. For example, one A. Milford might have fit that role this week. We'll have the return of the disaster class, the punting disaster class, and I promise you I will not ask any wealthy investors to invest into any of it. We will just put tips out there ourselves and hopefully make some money along the way ourselves. And what else do we normally do? Do we have any salutes and slaps and shit this week?
No, I haven't.
I got a bonus salute. Andrew Voss throwing out the Rugby League Live line as we headed into Golden Point did make me laugh, Oliver.
Well, Andrew Voss, I think, deserves a round of applause and I'm so happy for him because calling that World Club Challenge game, he just seems so happy and full of life to the point where it made me chuckle. Where he said, "Are we going to see a draw between the 2 Queensland clubs, the 2 Queensland games this week like we saw last week?" And Brandy said, "Probably not." And he goes, "Oh, you're no fun." It was just that. And again, I've said it during last year as well. It's just sometimes Fossey's offhanded comments that just come out are the ones that make me laugh the most. And I had a good chuckle over that one. So
he was on a bit of a tear. He obviously enjoyed himself at the World Cup because I don't know how many times he mentioned the fucking Chinese joint, the fish and chip shop that was around the corner from one of the stadiums he stayed at. But
there is no better Voss than Andrew Voss, and I know better Vossi than Andrew Voss. I'm sure there's lots of other nice Vosses around. Or Vosser family is probably very nice. But Andrew in particular, and he gets his own irony, and I like that he leans into it, so it makes me laugh.
He's just an absolute fan. He's a nutbag and loves his footy. It just comes through with his commentary, which is good to see.
As if someone should give him a show called The Fan or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Write that down, Ollie. Beauty. Well, that's it, I guess. Anything you want to add? Check out rugbyleaguemerch.com. Buy our hats, buy our shirts, buy our Steins and everything else going on there, coffee mugs, and sign up to our tipping comp on social media through Instagram and Facebook. You'll find PCTC tipping comps there. The Rugby League comp the NRL comp is live amongst the many, many other comps there. So check them out and jump on board with that.
5,000 comps.
Yeah.
And just for the Supercoach fanatics, we'll probably go a little. We've only got the preview to do next week, so we might have a little bit more of a look and an opinion on a few of the players coming into Supercoach next year. And for the round one.
Just for those that don't play Supercoach, we don't tend to hammer it as much as we have pre-season, but as
no. Once the season's up and going, you might throw a name here and there, but that's about it.
Yeah.
I'll use that segment as my toilet break next week.
Good.
We also have a spot in our league because Ollie's good kicked out after that comment. But cool. All right, we're just waffling now. So thanks for listening.
We are.
Leave some commentary on social media across all platforms as well as on YouTube. Take care, guys, and we'll be back next probably next Wednesday night if I was going to hazard a guess,
Yeah, middle of the week
to
somewhere.
preview round 1 of the National Rugby League. Bye-bye.
Night, everyone.